Present. Okay, the next item on the agenda, item number 2, resolutions and necessity. Stephen? Oh, we got to wait.
You don't have 8.
Okay. So we'll move to item number 3, approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye. There's a change.
You want to bring it up? Andre?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to note that the minutes have a correction on the number of votes for the consent calendar. The correct number should be 8-0 instead of what's shown on the minutes as 7-0. There's a change actually in your packet that is in front of you. I just wanted to note that for the record. Thank you.
Is that correction acceptable to the maker of the motion?
Yes, it is. I like correct motions.
And the second? I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Andre, Executive Director's report.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. I have a couple of things. The first, as noted on the agenda, is the California Transportation Foundation Scholarship Award. That has been moved to the March meeting. The candidate is from Southern California, so we thought it would be more appropriate to do it as in Southern California as we're down there in March. The second item on under my report is a change to the meeting calendar for 2014. This is really just noting that the meeting in October will take place in Pasadena as opposed to the Central Valley, and Commissioner Assimi has concurred to this, so in his absence I will note that, so you're comfortable with that decision. So that requires your approval, and I have a couple of other notes to make. Maybe I'll make those and then ask for your approval on the calendar. The other 2 items I have is I want you to join me in congratulating Laura Pennebaker, who we were able to just promote to an assistant transportation planner. Senior transportation planner. That's a well-deserved appointment for Laura. She's done a great job for the Commission. She's been working very hard on the implementation of 375, helping Susan and other constituents around the state. So, good job, Laura. And we also have brought on board on loan, and this is a thank you to Director Dougherty of Caltrans for allowing this to happen. We have David with us here helping on the ATP program, helping Mitch. He's actually worked with Mitch since the beginning of the ATP from Caltrans' side, and then we thought it may be good for him to see how this program comes about as we go through the motions here at the Commission. So I would like you to welcome him on the staff. He will be with us until the end of June as it stands today. And with that, I ask for your approval for the change in the calendar.
I have a motion
Second?
and a second by Commissioner Dunn, a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Stephen, I believe we could go back to item number 2, correct?
Yes, Commissioners. There's 8 Commissioners present, so we can go forward. If the Chair could inquire if the property owner or his representative is present.
Is the property owner or the property owner's representative present?
Okay, seeing and hearing no response, staff has received a letter from the property owner's attorney requesting that the Commission postpone action on this item. Staff feels that the only thing that's outstanding between the department and the property owner are issues of compensation. So staff would recommend that the Commission approve the resolution of necessity and put the dispute in the venue that's appropriate for a resolution, which is the courts.
I have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, seconded by Commissioner Gardino. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. At this time, I'd like to welcome our newest commissioner, Jim Medaffer, from the San Diego area. Welcome, Jim. You don't know what you're in for. Next item is item number 5, commission reports. Does anyone have a report? Commissioner Inman? There's a little button.
A little tiny button.
That one? Okay, wrong button, right string, wrong yo-yo. Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of things to report. In our agenda later, we'll be talking about the primary freight network, but I did want to make sure you were all aware that the National Freight Advisory Committee that I have the pleasure of serving on will be having a webinar meeting on the 6th of February, and we'll get you all those logistical details. But as you know, I spend a lot of time dealing with freight and supply chain issues, so I think the more of us that can participate as we try to work through what our national freight policy will look like will be better. So I can tell you from around the United States, there are lots of folks chomping at the bit, trying to push us out of our dominant role in terms of goods movement through our ports. So I'd encourage all of you to participate. I've seen a number of letters that have gone in, but stay engaged would be my request. We had Secretary Fox out for a visit last week, one of our long-awaited transit groundbreakings, and also a tour of the port and logistics that occur in Southern California. Also, we had Deputy Director Greg Nadeau that was out for our groundbreaking of the 215, and I do need to share that the CTC did win 2 Academy Awards at that groundbreaking. So my fellow Commissioner Tavoloni and I were recipients, so we thanked all of you in our acceptance speeches. So anyway, hats off to our friends in District 8, much needed project that was a long time coming out there on the 215, but we appreciate being there. Thank you.
Thank you, Fran. Any other reports? Commissioner Gardino?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very briefly, I had the honor of representing our commission at the 150th anniversary of the launch of the Caltrain commuter rail service in the peninsula and the San Francisco Bay Area. It opened when Abraham Lincoln was President of the United States. Today it carries about 51,000 daily passenger trips with a fare box return well north of 50%. It's a commuter rail system that works, and it was an honor to represent the Commission.
Great, thank you. Any other reports? Thank you. Before we move on, we have a number of items coming up that I know we're going to have a bunch of speakers for, so if you haven't filled out a speaker card, I believe they're in the back, and you can hand them up here. Item number 6, Commissioners' Meeting for Compensation. If you don't want to get...
I move we be compensated.
I second that motion.
I have a motion by Commissioner Arp, seconded by Commissioner Dunn. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 7 is the election.
5 minutes for Darius.
Is the election of Commission Chair and Vice Chair, and we have a request by Commissioner Assimi, who I guess is still counting votes somewhere, to delay this until he arrives. So we're going to move on to item number 8, report by Agency Secretary, stand-in Brian Ennis. Hi, Brian.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Brian Annis sitting in for Secretary Brian Kelly. And first off, I wanted to, on behalf of the Secretary, welcome the new Commissioner, Mr. Medaffer. Welcome. In the same vein of welcomes, I wanted to let the Commission know that the agency has recently filled our Deputy Secretary position. We were very happy to have brought in Chad Edison, who was most recently with the Federal Railroad Administration in Washington. And in my time at the agency over the last 18 months, I've, one of the great, the efforts underway or the great opportunities has been to integrate the different rail efforts of the state and also the regional and local rail operators. And there's certainly a great number of challenges there. I think progress has been made. Certainly the Caltrans Rail report that recently came out did have good inclusion of the high-speed rail project, but we're really excited to have Chad on board and for all the the individuals out there that operate rail systems. You'll be hearing from Chad soon if you haven't already. The other thing I wanted to mention to the Commission was that we expect to release tomorrow an external review of Caltrans from the State Smart Transportation Institute. Some of you may have already heard about this effort. The Secretary kicked it off last year. It's a unique group of consultants that have performed this review. The State Smart Transportation Institute is out of the University of Wisconsin, but they bring in expertise of former DOT directors from other states. So in that group was Gene Conte, who was DOT director of North Carolina, Al Beeler from Pennsylvania, and Doug Foy from Massachusetts. So a great wealth of information that I think goes way beyond your typical external review group. These external reviews always cause some angst, but I think there's real opportunity here. This group was charged at looking at performance broadly and also performance specifically related to sustainability, which is of course, a major state policy shift over the last decade to do more in that area. And one of the interesting observations of the group was that a lot of sustainability initiatives over the past few decades have really worked around Caltrans. Of course, the 375 effort was directed at regions and charged them with a huge responsibility. High-speed rail, of course, is operated outside the Department of Transportation. Recently, just last year, a Senate Bill 743 passed that is asking Office of Policy and Research to look at alternatives to level of service in developing mitigation for development projects. And I think what this brings to light is that the expertise of Caltrans hasn't been fully leveraged as it should be in these areas, and perhaps the state has gotten into a mode of almost working around the department in pursuing some of these important transportation goals. So we see this as a real opportunity to, again, re-engage that expertise at the Department of Transportation and get more involved in these efforts of making our transportation system more sustainable and broadly more effective, cost-effective, and beneficial for the public. I believe there's another report later in the agenda on the California Transportation Investment Priorities Work Group, so I'll hold comment on that until that later item in the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions of Brian? Thank you very much. Now we'll go back to item number 7, election of Commission Chair and Vice Chair for the coming year.
Mr. Chair, help him out.
Commissioner Simi?
Mr. Chair, it'll be my pleasure to nominate Ms. Lucy Dunn for Vice Chair, and Carl Guardino for our Chair in this upcoming year.
Any other nominations? Hearing none, we have a motion by Commissioner Simi, a second by Commissioner Inman. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Congratulations. Okay, moving on to item number 9, report by Caltrans Director. Malcolm?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and also let me offer up my welcome to the newest Commissioner, Commissioner Medaffer, and we look forward to working with you. And if you have not already been introduced to Lori Berman, our District Director down in San Diego, that's a very important person to get to know as far as going forward and working with the Commission. So congratulations. We look forward to working with you. Congratulations to the new chair and the new vice chair for your appointment. On a slight personnel issue for Caltrans, you may remember I asked Rick Land to dedicate all his time to help us with the heavy lift getting across the finish line and opening up the Bay Bridge. I had a few other tasks I wanted him to work on, but he's going to migrate back to be in the chief deputy position in Sacramento full time. I want to offer in this public forum my sincere thank you to Norma Ortega for acting as the chief deputy and doing an outstanding job, and then also to Stephen Keck for his role as the chief financial officer, and then Mr. Ron Shepard was backfilling Stephen Keck. So my greatest appreciation to each of those folks for the roles that they played. A couple of projects we had open up just at the end of last week, and Commissioner Inman highlighted the Interstate 215 corridor improvement project, carpool lanes, aux lanes, and other significant improvements on that corridor that are going to be key to that Inland Empire route. So my congratulations also to District 8 as well as Sandbag. At the end of last week, we also opened up the Santa Maria River Bridge and had a ribbon cutting. That's the bridge that goes between Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo counties. And it also, beyond adding additional capacity, added a Class 1 bike path. And funding partners were not only the state, but also both counties. So congratulations to Santa Barbara County and SLO, as well as District 5 on those. Brian Annis was talking about the release of the SSTI report. The department also released yesterday a summary report on our program review that we've conducted over the last 12 to 18 months. And we really targeted organizational and process opportunities to improve efficiency and effectiveness of the department, as well as any ways to enhance the productivity of our partnerships with our local stakeholders, since they play such an important role in funding transportation improvements throughout the state. I have copies here with me today, and I'll send those down the line so that you can take a look at it. This document will also be prominently displayed on our website for all to look at. We circulated this document not only to our staff, but also out to all our local partners. We are looking forward to working with the Secretary and the SSTI folks on the recommendations coming forward, and we'll have a good opportunity to review those tomorrow, and adding their external perspective to the internal effort that we did here over the last 18 months. Both those efforts will play important roles going forward as we update our strategic plan in the upcoming months. There are several items I'd like to highlight on the agenda this month that I think are very important topics to talk about. A status of the fuel taxes in California by Mr. Keck, a discussion about mileage-based user fees, and we have Norma Ortega to talk about that, as well as a gentleman from the Oregon DOT to share his experience in what they're doing up in Oregon, Mr. James Woody, and I want to express my appreciation for him making the trek down here to let us know what's going on up there. We've also, you're familiar with a gentleman, Gary Gutierrez, who did a wonderful job on the Buy America. He did so good with that sticky wicket. We've asked him to help us out with the mileage-based user fee program. So you'll see Gary working on that topic, and I appreciate his effort on that. Also, HOV lane degradation. And also partly a discussion on managed lanes on the agenda today, and I look forward to that discussion, as well as an update on the freight mobility plan and the National Primary Freight Network. All of these are very important topics to be covered today, and I look forward to that discussion. And with that, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have or any other topics.
Okay, any questions of Malcolm? Commissioner Simi?
Malcolm, any update on the Bay Bridge safety?
Well, I mean, I could talk for quite some time on the status. There are three subjects that came up over the last couple of weeks, and I will be as gently as I can and politically correct as I can. I think the presentation of the concerns was a very one-sided presentation, and I think what I'm working very diligently to do with the Transportation Committee in the Senate is to provide that other half of that story. There are other engineers that made decisions on the safety of several different components and elements, and those decisions are well documented. We feel like we have all the documentation that represents that the project met specification. We did all the quality control, quality assurance necessary on each of these items, and they were peer-reviewed by outside experts. That goes for the welds, and that goes for... Now, there is an open question about the rods that broke. That functionality has been replaced, and that work is done. We are doing extensive testing to determine the disposition of the remaining rods, and that testing is ongoing. And, in fact, what we're going to do late in February, I believe the date is February 24th, is we're going to bring any outside experts that have an opinion and have them meet directly in an open public workshop with our experts. And it'll be metallurgist on metallurgist. I'm sure that it's going to be riveting, but I want to air out all the concerns and all the opinions before we make a final decision on anything to do with the remaining rods that are on the bridge before we make any decision. So that's the status of that. I believe, and I believe strongly because of all the documentation I have, that every other issue that we've encountered, and there have been engineering challenges, there have been construction challenges, there have been political challenges on this project, and I believe that we've overcome all of those. and we will overcome the final decision on the rods.
Thank you. Looking forward to an update from you after the February 24th riveting debate.
Any other questions? Malcolm, I have a couple, again, regarding the bridge. I heard a report that we might have to replace things 5 years from now, or...
So the question that was brought up, and any of the critics that testified last week, all acknowledged in direct questioning that the bridge is safe and that we expect to achieve the 150-year life. There's an opinion by one individual that we'll have a higher level of maintenance on some of the welds because of the repairs that had to be done, and his opinion was that we may have to start doing repairs as early as 5 or 6 years into the life of the bridge. None of my experts believe that that is the case. We have nothing to date to tell us that that may be the case, and we feel that we're going to get the intended lifespan of not only the bridge but of those welds. None of the pieces of the deck left China until they were fully inspected and the quality control, quality assurance measures were met. But that was that one individual's opinion, and we don't share that same opinion.
I know we turned all the tolls over to BATA. When do we turn the ownership of the bridge over to them so it becomes their problem?
We never turned the ownership of the bridge over to BATA. BATA is the tolling authority and the funding authority for repairs as well as maintenance, but it's always the state's bridge.
So it's the state's bridge, but financially to fix anything or maintain it rests with BATA?
There's of the 7 toll bridges in the Bay Area, there's an arrangement and clear articulation as far as the funding and the revenue from the tolls and to what they pay for. And yes, those tolls pay for the maintenance of the bridge.
So it won't come out of the state highway account or any other state funds?
That's correct.
Are you guys going to do kind of a lessons learned scenario out of this?
Yes. It is not uncommon to do a post-construction review of a project, and I've been involved in post-construction reviews of projects throughout my career, either as a construction representative, as a design representative, or as a project manager. This is a project that's going to be a little more involved. I asked, and it has been initiated, to do a post-construction review of this project, and we're about halfway through, and it'll probably be about a 2-month effort. I've already gotten briefings on what the status of that is. And it will be high level as far as the management structure and some of those things, as far as the administration of it. And the intent that I wanted to get out of it is if we start another large mega project of anywhere near that magnitude in the upcoming months, what would we do different? What would we enlist that was similar to that as far as oversight committees, and maybe what other state agencies may learn from that experience that we had. So that process to do a post-construction review, interviewing and inclusive of all the parties that were involved, as well as the construction team and the design team, is underway currently.
Would it be possible to have that brief presentation to the Commission sometime in the future when that's complete?
Absolutely. That'd be a good idea.
Commissioner Inman?
I just wanted to ask Malcolm, since we are underway with the Gerald Desmond Bridge, if there are any lessons learned that we need to apply there as well, and maybe not wait till you finish your report. If you see something that we can do better, I think we'd want to make sure that we're doing it. And I know there's an oversight committee. I don't think the CTC sits on that oversight committee, but it might be good to have an update periodically on that large bridge also.
No, I would agree with that as well. I think that we have set up a similar executive steering committee or oversight committee on the Gerald Desmond Bridge. One of the important factors that we've learned in any of these large projects is have the other stakeholders who have a financial stake as well as a scope stake in the outcome at the table and participative in that. The CTC, Metro, LA, the Port of Long Beach, and we also include the Federal Highway Administration in those discussions. And we definitely are taking some of those lessons learned, and I think we will also build on that when we get some more input, and that is fed by this other effort. But I think that is, I think we certainly are trying to do that and take that into consideration, and we'd be more than happy to provide an update on the Gerald Desmond Bridge at your pleasure as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Dunn.
Just a quick one, Malcolm. Can you give us a couple sentences? I understand High-Speed Rail is aggressively asking for an expedited review of a court process. Maybe you can chat a little bit about that?
I'll defer.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Dunn, there's some breaking news on that today, which perhaps haven't fully absorbed, but I think the perspective I had on that process was that the authority should do everything they can to keep that project on schedule and on budget. And so this opportunity or this mechanism came up to go to the California Supreme Court and ask for an expedited review. My understanding is just this morning the California Supreme Court directed that review to I believe the Third Court of Appeals for an expedited review in that form. So I believe that is, again, still learning of the court processes here, but I believe that in terms of achieving an expedited review, this has achieved that by Supreme Court directing expedited action at the appeals court.
I noticed Malcolm dodged a bullet train. Little play on words. Okay, moving right along. Item number 10, report by FHWA. Vince, I want you to know there are now 4 Italians sitting up here. I love it. Yeah, Medaffer misspelled his name, but he's really Italian.
And we already like you better than the rest of them. So, welcome. See what we're saying? Darn right. And I will also want to acknowledge that I had nothing to do with the rivet comment or the bullet comment. All right? So I just want a little credit for I don't write Malcolm's material for him. Happy New Year. I don't think we've met since the New Year, I believe. Wanted to start off with thanking Caltrans for the work they did on a MAP 21 tribal working session. So there's an implementation of MAP 21. Caltrans had brought in a bunch of partners earlier, and just last week we had one with the tribes in California. So there were several tribal representatives at a national level, at a statewide level. So I want to thank the effort and the contribution of that. The outreach to the tribes here in California is something that I think we're trying to step up, and I appreciate the recognition of Caltrans to realize, and our planning partners to realize the effort that needs to be made and where we need to go with that. So I appreciate that effort. Just a heads up, look for the planning and safety notice of proposed rulemakings. Should be coming out in late February. They seem to be a little bit of a moving target, but the goal is late February, and that'll be the opportunity to comment on those. We're at 11.75, I think I understand, with DBE participation here in California. When I got here 5.5 years ago, we were at maybe 1 point something DBE participation, so a big effort that's been made in that. We appreciate the effort that goes into that. Still, the overall goal is 12.5%. We should be able to accomplish that, but there's still a lot of work to be done to get up past that point. And we're going to need the locals' help in this also, so it's not just Caltrans, it's everybody who administers the federal dollar. So we appreciate any effort that can be put towards that. You kind of, every once in a while, you want to compare yourself to the other states. Inactive obligations. Right now, that's a big push that we're having our regulation with inactive obligations. Those are projects that haven't been billed in over a year, that have been authorized. Last quarter, ending in December, 0.23%. There's one state in the country that has lower than that, and that's Utah. So of the rest of the states out there, California is tied for second. So congratulations on that. That's a big effort that went in to getting rid of those inactive obligations. That's the first things auditors look at. Is why are you coming to me asking for money if you have it sitting on your books and you're not using it? So Caltrans, I know the locals have put a great effort, so I'm speaking to this group, and I'm thanking this group also for the effort that went into getting that down. And then lastly, I sent a letter to Malcolm recently, and I think there's going to be a presentation on the HOV degradation. There's some work that needs to be done in that, some kind of meat that we need to get involved in that. There's a lot of opportunities to improve the HOV network here in California. So I think that's going to be covered. I saw a preview of the slides. I think that'll be covered thoroughly in the slides. I think that is all I have. Does anybody have anything for me? Congratulations, commissioners, for your next chairman and vice chair. Anything for me?
Any
I
questions?
can walk away quietly. I don't have a problem with that at all.
That's rare.
That's great. Good
All
for
right,
me.
thanks, Vince, I appreciate it.
All right, thanks.
Next item is item number 11, report regional agencies, moderator.
Good afternoon, Chair Gilmetti and Commissioners, Secretary and Director. My name is Adrienne Cardoso. I'm with OCTA, and I'm the RTPA moderator. Also, I wanted to welcome Commissioner Madaffer and just let you know the RTPAs are responsible for programming state and federal funds throughout the state. We also work with the local agencies and with Caltrans to make sure that projects get delivered. And as Administrator Romano mentioned, we worked really hard recently on cleaning up inactive obligations with our local agencies. So just a quick introduction. We just met, so I don't have prepared comments, but I can share with you that today we heard a report on cap and trade status. We also got a preview of the 2014 STIP. And we learned from local assistants that the state is going to receive possibly an extra 50 to 60 million in OA, of which we are fortunate to hope to receive about 20 to 25 million. So we'll work very hard to make sure that all of that gets obligated. The big issue on the agenda today for us was the active transportation program. I'll save most of my comments for the hearing, and I'll represent the group there, but I do want to share with you just three quick things. One is we developed a subcommittee to work with your staff on one issue we're really concerned about. It's sort of a technical issue, and that's programming of 1314 TAP apportionment into the FTIP in 1415. It's pretty technical, but we've set up a subcommittee to work with them to figure out ways that we can accomplish that. Later today, just to give you a brief highlight, we'll make two requests of the Commission. One is that the Commission consider allowing the MPO regions to program the 1314 TAP apportionment early in 1314 to projects that are consistent with ATP goals and are ready to go. That's one thing I'll discuss later. And then the second request is going to be for a modified allocation process. As the go-between often, or as the agencies that actually deliver projects, we hope that you will consider our experience and allow for an alternative allocation process for maybe some of the smaller projects. But I'll talk to you about that more later this afternoon. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions of Adrian? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next report is by Rural Counties Task Force. Sharon?
Okay. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Sharon Scherzinger, Executive Director, El Dorado County Transportation Commission, Chair of the Rural Counties Task Force. And we'd like to welcome Commissioner Madaffer. And along the same lines as Adrian, we represent the 26 rural transportation planning agencies in the state of California. Our last meeting was January 17th. We were fortunate to have Undersecretary Annis come and give us a presentation on the CTIP proposal that the governor as well as the agencies in the state are working on. We appreciated the opportunity to comment on that. We also saw how it aligned with the governor's proposed budget that was released on the 10th. There are a couple observations that we had. We definitely support within the budget the repayment of the loans, as well as the $100 million for cities and counties for road repair. There are some other general comments that we had in regard to rural agencies and the investment of cap and trade funds that we saw in that budget. It's obviously largely guided by SB 375 and reduction of greenhouse gases. We would like to have further discussion in terms of how that would play out in a rural area in the state, what is sustainability there, and how would the transportation dollars be invested. A second item we had on our agenda was more internal. We're ready to award a contract to actually help streamline administration for rural agencies in terms of our planning funds and activities. And so we came together as a group of the 26 counties to do that. The other is we're getting ready to release a request for a proposal to do rural performance measures. And that will be underway shortly, and Nevada County is helping us undertake that work. And then lastly, in regard to the active transportation program, we put together a letter that we sent to Chairman Gilmetti on the 27th. There are 5 things in the active transportation program I'd like to highlight on behalf of the rural agencies. One is that we support the 10% funds going to the rural and small urban areas of the state. Secondly, we like the flexibility in terms of the definition of disadvantaged communities. We like that there's an opportunity for agencies that may not have match, that not be a really high criteria. We also agree with the RTPA group. We would like a simplified allocation process, potentially along the lines of the SHOP minor program. And then the last comment we have is that we would like to have a regional role and that the projects selected are consistent with our regional transportation plans and in areas like my county would be consistent with a sustainable community strategy. So are there any questions?
Any questions of Sharon?
Okay.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Item number 13, self-help counties. Andy? Keith? You don't look like Andy.
Keith Dunn here, filling in for Andy Chesley. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to Commissioner McDaffer to the Commission. Thank you very much. Self-help counties is 20 counties representing the self-help sales tax initiatives and programs that the locals have passed. For those of you that are unfamiliar, we have also, like my colleagues who've just previously reported, been looking at and involved with active transportation and spoke with many of you about that program, as well as the cap and trade revenues. I'd like to maybe talk about a little different focus that we've been discussing internally, and thank Director Doherty for his involvement in reaching out to us on the managed lanes policy. It's a program that has gotten a lot of attention among our group. We are working on some internal documents, but have appreciated the dialogue and conversation with the department and communication and partnership that's been offered there. And we're looking forward to the debate today as you start talking about that policy and program. We haven't had our first meeting of the year. We're likely to meet sometime in March. We're very anxious to look and see what the Governor and Secretary Kelly and the Secretary Annis come out with regards to recommendations on CTIP, and look forward to continuing to participate and supporting that as we move forward. Short of that, if you have any questions, I'd be pleased to answer.
Any questions for Keith? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Moving on to item number 14, state and federal legislative matters. Carrie?
Commissioners, agenda item 4.1 is an action item. The legislature reconvened on January 6 to begin the second year of a 2-year session. Bills introduced in 2013 need to pass out of their house of origin by the end of this week, January 31st. The last day to introduce new legislation for the 13-14 legislative session is February 21st. Staff is currently monitoring 36 bills as outlined in Attachment A that meet the Commission's criteria. Staff is not recommending any action on the by the Commission on the bills currently being monitored. Staff recommends that the Commission accept the staff report.
Any questions of Carrie? I have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, seconded by Commissioner Madaffer. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Carrie. We have a timed item in number 15 at 2 o'clock, and we're about 19 minutes away from that. So we're going to move down to item number 17, budget and allocation capacity update. Mitch?
Athena Glidden will be making the presentation for the department.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, I'll be presenting the budget and allocation capacity update. Even closer? Okay. Through December, the CTC has allocated approximately $1.3 billion, including authorized changes, to 211 projects. This represents 53% of our total capacity. As you can see, the STIP program has allocated just a little less than half its capacity, which is right in line for full expenditure. The SHOP has only allocated a quarter of its capacity. I believe they have a large delivery in the fourth quarter. And on to my favorite part. So on January 9th, the Governor released his proposed 14-15 budget. As you can see in the chart, both capital outlay and local assistance have been reduced. Capital outlay by approximately $800 million and local assistance by $1.1 billion. This is due almost entirely to the fact that Proposition 1B program projects are coming to an end. We've done our CMIA, our state and local partnership, our SHOP bonds, our TFA, which was our STIP bonds. We have allocated approximately $11 billion of the $12.025 billion for Caltrans 10 Proposition 1B programs, the ones that we administer. Also, one other item makes them a little bit off, and that's because the current year local assistance is higher than normal due to the $300 million transfer from the department to the Bay Area Toll Authority for the demolition of the Bay Bridge. So in essence, the two are actually reducing almost by exactly the same amount, $800 million. In addition to our there were some tiny increases to our support budget, and these are attributable to employee compensation, health and retirement benefits. Those are in accordance with the various bargaining unit agreements. So some of the big items, which I'm not going to dwell on a lot because I think we'll be covering a lot of this in the CTIP item. But one of our big BCPs that was championed was the early loan repayment. And essentially what that is that during the period between the fuel tax swap and the passage of Prop 22, which created the price-based excise, fuel revenue was borrowed for debt service and loans to the general fund. And originally the due date for return of those funds was in 2021. Okay, so a BCP was proposed for early repayment of those loans. In addition, there were some small loans that were due back in 16-17 that we were also asking to have advanced. What we're requesting is that we advance those for the items listed, 210 for SHOP, for the advancement of SHOP program into the budget year, $100 million to the cities and counties, distributed much like the 2108, which is the way the cities and counties get their funds in the price-based excise, which is 50% cities, 50% counties, with various weighting factors. $27 million for highway pavement maintenance, and then there was some funds that were going back to the bicycle transportation account and the pedestrian safety account, nearly $9 million, which we are adding to the active transportation program. In addition, there was $5 million for the environmental enhancement and mitigation program. However, that program is no longer administered by Caltrans, so those funds will be going to Resources Agency. In addition, in order to advance these projects, we are requesting 12 positions to do PIDs, program initiation documents, to replace those advanced projects in the out years. And it's 12 positions, limited term for 3 years. But there's no funds associated with that because it's going to be offset by projected reductions in our overall capital outlay support finance letter, which is due out in May. The next big item is the greenhouse gas emissions reduction, which we also like to call cap and trade. Overall, there's a $850 million worth of projected expenditure authority. Of that, $300 million is for new rail funding. Broken down, $250 million of that is for high-speed rail, and the remaining $50 million is for Caltrans for competitive grants to existing rail operators in order to provide connectivity to high-speed rail. There was an additional $100 million proposed for the Strategic Growth Council, and it's my understanding that Caltrans is going to assist in the implementation and administration of this program, which may include funding for transit, active transportation, as well as transit-oriented affordable housing and agricultural land preservation. We also did a zero-based budgeting exercise. Per Executive Order B1311, Caltrans and DOF have been working together and have developed a 4-year goal to analyze all of Caltrans programs. Okay, In 13-14, two of those programs were analyzed. That was the Aeronautics Program and the Capital Outlay Support Program. Capital Outlay Support is our direct charging to projects. As a result of these reviews, a one-time transfer from the local airport loan account to the aeronautics account in the amount of $4 million is proposed in order to leverage federal funding for airport improvements. In addition, they have requested statutory changes to allow for future transfers from the local airport loan account to the aeronautics account, pending CTC and Department of Finance approval. Also, the Capital Outlay Support Review had no budgetary changes. The recommendations were related to improving estimating and accountability. We should see some of the results of that as we come forward in May with our finance letter. Last but not least, I was going to talk about the Highway Trust Fund shortfall. At the beginning of the federal fiscal year 2014, the beginning balance was approximately $1.6 billion. Of course, there was a large infusion of general fund cash. However, it is projected that the account will become insolvent by September 30th, 2016. There was a proposal in the House to increase gasoline and diesel tax by 15 cents and to tie these increases to inflation. But given the difficulty in passing federal legislation, it's considered unlikely that this increase will be successful. In order to maintain the current funding levels, the fund will need an additional $15 billion per year to make up the revenue shortfall. This graph was provided by the U.S. Department of Transportation. All the projections displayed are theirs. The reason why I bring that up is because it can have a long-term effect on our programs, as the SHOP is mostly funded with the federal funds. And any reduction in federal funding levels can have a direct impact on the delivery of our large maintenance programs. Any questions?
Any questions, Ms. Eno? Commissioner Dunn.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. Could you, if I heard your words correctly, on the $100 million to the Strategic Growth Council, you said it may go to transit, may go to Agland. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I believe that Mr. Annis is going to speak on that in detail.
Boy, Brian, I should just take you out to lunch. I have so many questions for you today.
Well, the program that Athena's speaking of, the Sustainable Communities Implementation Program, is a program that's intended to support communities as they go forward to implement their 375 plans. Looking at the complexity of those efforts, it's of course not just transportation, it's also incorporating land use, building more housing closer to transit, preserving agricultural land around the urban perimeter that also supports more compact development. So there were a lot of things going on with that program. The administration, for that reason, proposed to put the administration of the program at the Strategic Growth Council, which is a council of I think 6 or 7 state agency secretaries. We have, of course, the Secretary of Transportation on that body. Housing, with the recent government reorganization, has now moved to a different agency, Business, Consumer Services, and Housing. Secretary Caballero is also on the Strategic Growth Council. Secretary Laird with the Resource Agency is on the council, and we have the agricultural land preservation component. So it was placed there to bring in expertise on all these different areas. In terms of how that money will get spent, it's not defined in the budget proposal, but there are some listed project types that would initially be those things the commission will, or the council will initially look at. And what was listed in the budget was transit, active transportation, housing near transit and low-income housing near transit, agricultural land preservation, and perhaps some related planning to those type of activities. So I don't think the scope is necessarily limited to that list, but that's the list that was cited in the budget document as a first cut of it.
And I know you don't have the details yet. I can hear that in the words, but was it conceptually that the council would be making local grants to local agencies or to nonprofit housing groups, or would they be spending the money themselves? Do you have any sense of that? Or competitive? It's probably, you just don't have the details.
Yeah, I think mostly the latter. I will mention, certainly it's recognized that this is a program to assist the locals in implementing the plans they've put together.
So the council would spend the money, or locals would spend the money?
It would be a grant program.
A grant program.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just a comment,
Commissioner
Mr. Chairman. We're losing a lot of ag land in Central California because of lack of water. Can this program take a look at water as well? Talk about ag land preservation.
Commissioner Inman?
Well, I will mention, I think the Resource Agency, in suggesting this be a component of the program, I'm not sure was looking specifically at the water issue, but looking at the loss of the Williamson Act program that went away several years ago. That was a program that used some property tax reimbursements to incentivize, I think, protective clauses or conservation clauses for a period, I think, of 10 years. And that program was dissolved or unfunded in the budget a few years ago. So I believe that the major intent is to preserve the ag land, and certainly we're happy for the rain today.
Commissioner Inman?
I think you talked about SHOP allocation, and we were at 25% halfway through the year.
Yes.
Could you explain a little more detail on that? Because if I look at the early loan repayment with the 210 for SHOP, it seems to me like we need to get some money out and fix some more things.
I believe that the SHOP program and historically has had heavy fourth quarter delivery. So I do not believe that the allocations as they stand right now are significantly out of line with what we've seen in prior years. So they've only allocated a quarter, but generally speaking, SHOP has delivered late in the year.
Well, it's just that we have such needs everywhere in all of our communities in terms of repairs. So maybe our traditional allocations, we need to ramp up a little bit to get some things out the door.
If I can, Mr. Chair, our biggest push is to make sure we have balanced delivery throughout the year, and actually it is a challenge. We tend to be heavier in the third and the fourth quarter. Most of these SHOP projects are multi-year projects. It's not an individual allocation for this year, but for whatever reason, the delivery sets up for greater allocations in the fourth quarter. And what the optimum is balanced throughout the year, such that we're getting the most competitive bids, and that's what we really strive for. But the challenge for us is pushing down the third and fourth quarter and having more delivery in the first and second quarter. A lot of the times the fourth quarter is a heavy quarter because we don't want it to slip to the next year and be in the first quarter. So we're doing everything we can to deliver it in this year, which ends up being the fourth quarter. But the optimum is balanced throughout all four quarters.
Commissioner Arp?
A couple of questions. Regarding the issue you were just discussing, isn't some of that seasonal? I mean, you can't do much of this in the middle of the wintertime.
Except this year.
Except for this year. So never mind. I think Fran is right on point. Let's get those guys out there working. Next question. On the cap and trade, so this goes back to Brian Annis, I assume. I feel sometimes like I'm kind of a lone person speaking about this, but there's several sources or main categories of sources of greenhouse gas. stationary sources, public utility sources, and then what is attributed to motorists, which is about almost 40% of the total. So a good portion of the program is going to be funded by motorists at the pump. And it seems to me, I've always felt that when you look at that nexus, there ought to be a recognizable connection between what people are paying at the pump and what they're getting for it. I recognize that there will be many points of view on that. I suppose you could look at that and say that the $200 million that was allocated to Air Resources Board for Clean Burning Vehicles program is, could be attributed to that sector. But we've worked hard with the local governments to try to really focus on what could be done at the local level on this grant idea. You're quite familiar with what our discussions have been, Brian. But it seems to me that much of what we have been focusing on is really not. It's just not there. There's a real valid area in the area of road rehab and repair, which has immediate greenhouse gas benefits. It may not be 50%. But a lot of the things that you're spending money on aren't going to be huge numbers. It's really how you combine those to try to get better synergy. But I don't see it in there, and it seems to me that we need to work on that.
Any other questions? Brian, did you want to respond to that?
Sure. I just, I would just say that, the overall package certainly recognized the need for preservation of our highways and local roads. And Athena mentioned the loan repayment. That was, that's a one-time infusion of money, but at the same time, it was otherwise might not have been repaid until 2021 under statute. And that's a different program. That's not the cap and trade program. But I think we are certainly going to have a robust discussion in the Strategic Growth Council. Again, we did in the May plan have this Sustainable Communities program that really grew out of the workshops. As the plan came together, the funding amount was $100 million, which isn't a lot given all the needs. And so the thinking was that these areas of active transportation, transit, housing near transit, et cetera, are the ones for the early focus with this amount of money. But I do certainly anticipate ongoing discussion on, whether that's a broad enough, program of projects.
Well, Brian, you hit a sore spot with me. I remember the old carnival game where you had the three walnut shells and the pea that goes back and forth. The general fund has borrowed money from transportation. Well, I've been on the commission 10, 11 years, Joe, and they've borrowed Indian gaming money and other monies, et cetera. And now it seems like the hole that we're created, we're backfilling with money that's already due us. It's filling a hole that shouldn't be there. So I'm a little frustrated with the governor's budget and how it was put together, and they're making us feel good by giving us back money early that they shouldn't have borrowed in the first place if it wasn't for the fiscal problems that the state was having at that time. I don't know that transportation has much of a voice anywhere in terms of demanding the funds that were created by transportation and supposed to be used by transportation. And I know I'm maybe preaching to someone who agrees with us, but we've got to do a much better job advocating to get our money put to where it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments. And when I've been observer of the budget for a number of years, and you're right, we do have these cyclical nature when transportation funds become fungible with the general fund, and when we look to fund new transportation expenditures with new general funds, it usually goes bad. And of course, over the years, there's been different constitutional provisions, restrictions, and so forth. But we're fortunate in this particular year that due to Prop 30 and other measures, we're certainly not in a mode of borrowing. We're actually in a mode of loan repayment, and I think that the California Transportation Investment Priorities work group we had, was well timed in that I think we're able to articulate within the administration the benefit of early loan repayment for this particular special fund, because there's many other loans out there.
We know.
And we were able to get this one in the budget.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for the nice comments and welcoming me. And at the risk of being the newbie here, you touched on a chord that I've noticed just reading so many things after the appointment, especially the annual report of the CTC, which I must confess I was probably more depressed a couple of weekends ago after reading that than I had been in a long time on the state of transportation funding in the state of California. And then what Chair Gilmetti was just echoing, I couldn't agree more. As somebody who campaigned vigorously on Prop 1B, for example, I thought, whoa, all of a sudden now that was supposed to be paid out of general fund, being a general obligation bond, but instead is gas tax. I'm thinking, well, why do we even do it? Because we could have done it just by gas tax through a bond. So I respect the position your agency's in and the governor's budget this year, but clearly seeing a presentation last week of the budget, a lot of one-time capital gains are looking like that might be another boost in addition to the Prop 30 money. I would just urge that for the next year's budget that a greater focus be placed on how upside down transportation funding is in the state, especially just maintaining what we have, let alone trying to go forward. And I know you recognize this. This isn't anything new to you, but I just wanted to vocalize my personal concern that just as something as simple as Prop 1B having to come out of the gas tax when that really ought to be going just to maintain the system, and the general fund ought to be covering that. So I would hope that we could look at fixing that as well as looking for things going forward in the future.
Commissioner Arp.
One suggestion I might have is going to the comments that were made. Technical. Your point is on technical payments that are coming out of Prop 1B are actually, I think, mostly coming from truck weight fees. But bottom line is, those are dedicated funds historically used for road repair. I was part of the group back then. Brian, you were around. You know that that agreed to the whole negotiations back when the budgets were really tough, and we were looking. Everybody was looking to try how they could be helpful. And so there was there was the diversion of truck weight fees to backfill the general fund for the specific purpose of financing transportation bonds. But Commissioner Madaver's points are really correct. I chaired that campaign, and we sold it as an investment being made out of the California by California for transportation. I'm hopeful in this better time that we are now in, and I do commend the governor for the early loan repayment. I think it's, those loans were taken when he wasn't around, and he's now taking the opportunity to pay those back early. So I do commend him for that. We do need to keep our eye on the ball, though. It's not new money. It's old money getting back where it needs to go. So there's not any new investment into transportation thus far in a lot of these. And I would really like us to take a robust discussion about how we can at least temporarily, without necessarily making permanent commitments, but let's take a look at putting truck weight fees back into transportation for a little while, while the budget's looking decent. That's $1 billion a year that's desperately needed, and frankly, in about 2 years or less, we're going to see a lot of people out of work who've been working on transportation, and it's not like it's a make-work program. There's all kinds of transportation infrastructure out there that is critically needed. So I would think that would be a priority to somebody. Thanks.
Mitchell, did you want to add something?
Yes, related to the last slide and the Highway Trust Fund shortfall, there was a U.S. DOT official who was quoted last week as saying that based on Treasury Department projections, they may have to slow reimbursement payments to states during the peak construction season to avoid emptying the Highway Trust Fund this year. And so I would suggest that we ask Caltrans to look into the potential impact that would have and report back to the Commission on that.
Okay.
Sure thing.
All right. Any more discussion? Thank you. Now we can go back to item number 15, the hearing on the 2014 Active Transportation Program Guidelines. Mitchell, you want to hit it off?
I would love to. The purpose of this hearing is to obtain public comment on the 2014 Active Transportation Program Guidelines. On September 26, the Governor signed legislation creating the Active Transportation Program. This legislation requires the Commission, in consultation with an Active Transportation Program work group, to develop guidelines by March 26, 2014. The Commission guidelines are to describe the policy, standards, criteria, and procedures for the development, adoption, and management of the Active Transportation Program. The Commission must hold at least 2 public hearings prior to adopting these guidelines. This is the second hearing. The first hearing was held last week in Los Angeles. The statute also requires the Commission to submit the draft guidelines to the Joint Legislative Budget Committee no later than 45 days prior to adopting the initial set of final guidelines. The Commission intends to adopt the guidelines on March 20th. Therefore, we need to submit the draft guidelines to the Joint Legislative Budget Committee no later than February 3rd. As a part of developing the guidelines, staff conducted a dozen work group meetings. These meetings were open to all interested participants and were held in a variety of locations in addition to having teleconference options. We also formed several work groups, each of which met twice to make recommendations on specific issues in the guidelines and then report those recommendations back to the larger work group. In addition, staff met and discussed ATP guidelines with several other groups of interested parties. I believe the guidelines developed by this process represent a general consensus of the work group. While achieving consensus, we certainly did not achieve unanimity. There are some issues in which staff did not concur with positions that are strongly held by some of the work groups. We're likely to hear about some of those issues today. Real quickly, I'll go over a few of them. There was a concern expressed about not having an application form to review. Caltrans is the lead in developing the application form. We're working with them on that, and we expect to have a draft available shortly. There was considerable discussion about eligibility in the rural and small urban program. Some people commented that the small urban and rural areas within a large MPO should be allowed to compete for funding in this portion. Others have commented that as the guidelines propose, the small urban and rural program should be limited to the areas outside the large MPOs. The process as outlined in the guidelines is anticipated to benefit large MPOs in the statewide competition. As 40% of the funds are required to be spent in large MPOs, limiting the small urban and rural program, which is 10%, to areas outside the large MPOs will provide some degree of geographic consideration as allowed under the federal TAP guidelines. A suggestion was made that to streamline the process, the Commission should delegate its role in allocating funds to the projects. This suggestion is based in part on the Commission's practice of providing lump sum allocations to Caltrans, which then get suballocated to recipients for non-competitive formula programs such as the RSTP and CMAQ programs. Unlike those federal programs which are non-competitive, the Active Transportation Program is a competitive process. The statute requires the Commission to allocate funds to the projects in this program. Individual project allocations are also important in ensuring that the Commission meets its responsibility related to project monitoring, reporting, transparency, and project performance measurement. A number of people have suggested that savings at the time of contract award and/or contract completion should be available for reprogramming to other active transportation program projects and to stay within the same pool of funds. The only Commission programs in which savings at award or completion remain in the program are those programs funded through separate accounts or funds established by the legislature. Other programs, such as the STIP or the ATP, are funded from Budget Act appropriations from larger accounts. These appropriations have limited periods for which the funds are available for allocation, encumbrance, and liquidation, and are not able to be recycled in the proposed manner. And even a program like the STIP, which is share-based, in that program, savings are not returned to shares at the time of award. I think further, it's incumbent upon implementing agencies to develop accurate cost estimates which avoid some of this excessive savings. There are bidding options such as additive bidding that allow additional scope to be delivered. Additionally, I would note that the guidelines as proposed would allow that a match over the required percentage to be the last dollar in on a project. That would allow an implementing agency to capture these savings if they had this overmatch, if you will. There's been considerable discussion about the timeline. We propose an aggressive timeline. Everybody involved will be hard-pressed to meet the deadlines. In particular, Caltrans has expressed concern about the ability to review applications in the time allotted. I think this is a reasonable concern. It's a new program. We have no idea how many applications we'll receive or how long it will take to review the applications. That said, we're under a statutory constraint, and really we're pushed by adopting the second year of the program, which needs to be adopted by April, the second cycle of the program, which needs to be adopted by April 1st of 2015. Without significant changes to the process, we'd be hard-pressed to adopt the 2015 program and time that so that that second call for projects doesn't overlap with the call for projects and the programming process we're undertaking for 2014. Lastly, an issue that has not been a subject of significant work group discussion but is being raised quite recently in a number of letters is about accelerating delivery of existing 13-14 projects. First, I would note that state law clearly requires the Federal Active Transportation Program funds to be included, Federal Transportation Alternative Funds to be included in the state's active transportation program. The guidelines are consistent with the statute and are developed in the time frame within the statute. We're not able to allow the obligation of those funds outside this program or outside the competitive process developed in statute. I think, I guess what I'd like to do next is I would like to note, as mentioned at the RTPA meeting, there was a concern raised on a very technical issue related to FTIP programming and that there might be a challenge with that. I'm not convinced this is a significant issue, but we're going to meet with a group put together by the RTPAs and Caltrans folks to make sure we all understand how we're going to get through this. I also have a few proposed changes which I would like to go through really quickly and then afterwards suggest we open the hearing for public comment. These are all relatively minor changes. First, on page 3 under distribution in a number of areas, clarified that the funds for disadvantaged communities are a minimum of 25%. Secondly, there are 2 areas on pages 3 and 4 that talk about disadvantaged communities and clarify this is predominantly benefiting disadvantaged communities and communities that are predominantly disadvantaged. There was a question raised about the timing of submittal of a MOU when someone's partnering with the implementing agency, and we will clarify that that's to be submitted with a request for allocation. In the scoring criteria, we had mentioned 3 measures of cost effectiveness, but only requested data on 2 of them. So we're asking people to submit information on all 3. We're clarifying that by May 21st, MPOs should notify the Commission of their intent to have a supplemental call for projects if they're going to have one. 2 more with relation to active transportation plan. If it's integrated in a general plan, we're clarifying that this general plan would have to be compliant with the Complete Streets Act, which it would have to be if it was updated, just a clarification consistent with existing law. And lastly, on page 18, related to active transportation plans and coordination with other jurisdictions, note that the coordination should include school districts within the plan area. That said, I suggest that we open the hearing to public comment, and if the commissioners wish, we can respond to some of the public comments afterwards.
Okay, any further questions of Mitch before we get started? I'll open the public hearing. We had one hearing 2 weeks ago in Los Angeles. We have a number of speakers today. We have 12 new speakers and 3 speakers who spoke in Los Angeles. I'm going to limit the speaking to 3 minutes so we can move through this. And the speakers who spoke in Los Angeles, if you have something new to present to us, that's fine. If not, I'd like yours to be even shorter. So we're going to start off with Hassan Ikrada, followed by Adrian Cardoso.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon to all of you. Unlike my colleagues, I want the record to reflect that you are my favorite California Transportation Commission. I want to thank you and your staff for the work you did in this, on this item. The workshops you held, truly magnificent, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. While we agree with most of the guidelines in front of you, we have a couple of suggestions that I hope you will consider. Keep in mind that active transportation can actually transform communities overnight. While it's not going to solve the traffic problems, but it has a huge impact on safety, walkability, how the community feels about itself. It's truly, in our region, in Southern California, our County Transportation Commission tripled their funding since the last regional transportation plan when it comes to active transportation. So I have 2 requests. One is let's keep it simple, and 2, let us get started. Keep it simple. Specifically, we're asking that you accept the recommendation from all the MPOs to allocate funding through a lump sum allocation, and respecting all the processes with that the CTC will approve the program for a project after we complete our processes. Caltrans will work with the project sponsors, and the MPOs and RTPs will still interface with sponsors to ensure projects are delivered on time. My second request is let's get started. We would hope that you obligate the federal fiscal 13-14 funds this spring rather than carrying them to the program adopted in November, currently proposed by your staff. We can show the tremendous need and further justify continued support in MAP 21 for these programs. I also finally ask that in order to leverage ATP resources, we recommend that cost effectiveness criteria be modified to assess the project benefit in relation to the funds provided by the ATP program, not the total project cost. With that, thank you. We have this in writing to your staff, and again, I appreciate the work that Mitch and the CTC staff did in the workshops. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much. The next speaker is Adrian Cardoso, followed by Phil Dow.
Good afternoon. Adrienne Cardoso here as the RTPA moderator. We too also want to thank CTC staff. Many of our requested changes are reflected in the new version of the guidelines, and we really appreciate the work that's gone into that. My comments are very similar to Mr. Ikrada. We would like to request the Commission consideration to allow the MPOs to advance projects that meet the goals of ATP into 13-14 using MPO TAP funds. Many of these projects were awarded through a regional competitive process and prioritized for funding, and many of them, all of them, meet the goals of the ATP program. We believe that this could be amended into the draft guidelines. Second, the RTPAs and local agencies have worked, I already said that part, sorry. We would request a modified allocation process. We've heard very clearly from your staff that a lump sum allocation process will not work, that there's not sufficient accountability, and also it's not consistent with the statute. So instead, we would recommend possibly an allocation process that's similar to the SHOP minor program, where Caltrans at the beginning of the year submits a specific list of projects that will be allocated that year. And if anything changes in terms of how those funds are allocated, it has to come back for specific commission action. Also, I believe informational status reports are provided to the commission on those allocations and their progress. The process as it stands right now is at a minimum a two-step process. Local agencies have to go through both the CTC allocation process and the FHWA process. This adds at least 3 months into the delivery of a project. For the MPOs, we're talking about potentially going through 5 different agencies, the RTPA, the MPO, Caltrans, CTC, and FHWA, all requiring approval. Anything that we can do to expedite allocation, getting the funds out there, getting the projects on the ground, is what we're asking for you to consider today. If for some reason you would like to do a demonstration program, we would suggest that possibly you could start with the MPO share. If you want to try it with just the MPO share and see how that works, we would appreciate that opportunity. Finally, we believe that it could be amended into the existing guidelines as they stand on page 12 under allocations with simply 1 or 2 sentences. That's our request today. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Okay.
The next speaker is Phil Dow, followed by Jose Nucio.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Phil Dow. I'm representing the Mendocino Council of Governments. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the hard work of your staff, and seldom have I seen so many opportunities to participate in a new program, and that's really commendable. I made about half of them, so your staff should be commended, especially the bald one. I'm here mainly standing here to support the 10%.
Phil, I want you to know he wasn't bald when this started.
I wasn't gray either. I wanted to strongly support the 10% set aside for the rural and the small urbans. Recognizing that I did a lot of homework yesterday and found that we're talking about only 7% of the population, but geographic-wise, those entities that would be covered under the 10% represents almost half the state, something like 48% of the geographic area of the state. On top of that, in looking at the number of state highway miles, we're talking about 30% of the state highway miles are in these areas that are eligible under the rural and small urban set aside. 30% of the state highway miles in the state. Only about 4% of the city streets, but 30% of the county roads. So it really is a significant area of California, somewhat out of proportion to the 10% set aside. And I want you to be thinking about that. In addition, for my county, Mendocino County, we have 10 federally recognized tribes in our county as well. And I don't know how many in all the other rural areas of the state, but it's quite a few. That is my major comment is that I strongly support the 10% set aside. I know that some of the larger areas have been making the case that, well, we have rural areas within our MPO, we should have access to that 10% set aside. But when you think about the magnitude of the geographic area that we cover, and you have the understanding that most of us do multiple things within our RTPA, we wear many hats, and we are really not going to be probably all that competitive with that huge 50% set aside that's available for everybody. With that, I'm done. Thank you.
You made it under 3 minutes. I'm surprised. Any questions of Phil?
I've been getting lessons in how to talk fast.
Thank you very much. All right, the next speaker, Jose, followed by Ken Cow.
Commissioners, good afternoon. My name is Jose Nuncio. I'm with the San Diego Association of Governments. Firstly, I'd like to echo the appreciation for Mitch in trying to just corral all of the comments from the various stakeholders in such a short time frame to come up with the draft guidelines that you have before you to allow the program to move forward as soon as possible. Secondly, I'd like to offer the following feedback, and I'll do it in order of appearance within the guidelines. On page 2 of the guidelines, there's the schedule. We would propose a change to the dates shown on the schedule as follows. For the deadline for MPO project programming recommendations to the Commission, which is currently shown as being due on September 30th, we would propose October 30th. MPOs cannot, in effect, begin their evaluation process until August 20th, when the Commission adopts its program, and knows which rejected projects will need to be evaluated by the regions. Even if we know Commission staff recommendations ahead of that date, there is no guarantee that staff recommendations will be approved as recommended. The schedule only gives regions about 40 days from August 20th to September 30th to evaluate, score, and rank the project submittals and present the recommendations to their stakeholder communities and to their boards. And then just associated with that change, requested change date, the recommendation is to change the date for Commission adoption of the MPO selected projects from November to December of 2014. This would give Commission staff sufficient time to review MPO proposals. Also, we'd like to note that the Commission's calendar does not currently show you meeting in November, so the earliest possible time would be in December. Second, regarding the match, and this is shown on page 3 of the guidelines, we propose that additional points be given to those agencies that can overmatch the ATP funds. We believe that this would allow the program to leverage additional funds and reward agencies that are taking steps to put more of their own funds to these types of projects. We recognize that this may not work for projects associated with disadvantaged communities, and perhaps extra credit under those circumstances could be exempted. However, we would propose credit for the overmatch for the rest of the program. Regarding the minimum size of the projects, and this is shown on pages 5 and 6 of the guidelines, we would request that the minimum size be increased for the statewide program from the current $250,000 to $500,000. Given the additional burden associated with complying with the federal process, a larger minimum project size would provide a larger cost benefit than smaller projects. We would prefer that the funds be used for projects and not so much for process. Fourth, and it's been mentioned before, we would request
quickly, Jose.
Yes. I'm sorry?
Your time's up, so you want to wrap it up?
Well, I thank the Commission.
Thank you. Okay, Ken, followed by Barbara O'Keefe.
Thank you, Commissioners. Kenneth Cow with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. Again, just like everyone before me, I do want to take time to thank Mitch and your staff for doing a wonderful job in reaching out to scores and scores of interested parties and RTPAs and MPOs, and also incorporating many of our comments that we've already made. So I would just like to make 3 main comments. First is we would prefer to have a streamlined allocation process, as was discussed earlier. The STIP process that is being proposed to be used was envisioned, I would argue, for large highway projects that are widening highways, improving interchanges, and I would say that ATP projects are not those and should not be subject to that same process. The SIP process may add 2 to 3 months due to getting the projects on the agenda, and so we would advocate for, instead of a project-by-project allocation, doing something like a delegated authority, much like for the SHOP minor projects. And just to give you some perspective, here at MTC, when we allocate projects, for certain programs, we do have delegated authority to our executive director for projects under $1 million. And we found that to be very useful and still keeping transparency, because every quarter we do report to our commission which projects were allocated via delegated authority. We do look forward to continue to working with your staff to make sure that all the ATP projects that are selected are delivered as efficiently and completely as possible. My second point is to ensure that all savings in the ATP return to the program. Mitch did mention that this may not be possible due to the way that the budget is done, but if that's the case, I would advocate that the Commission work with the legislature to ensure that whatever savings do accrue, that they do return back to the ATP program and not just revert back to the state highway account. And finally, I do want to support comments related to either expediting or bifurcating the MPO share of project selection in order to accelerate project delivery of the first year of the ATP. Much like what Jose Nuncio just mentioned, we do have concerns about the little bit of time that the MPOs have to evaluate our share of the program, and so any additional time or potentially advancing a piece of that would greatly be appreciated. And with that, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to comment, and happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you, Ken. Next speaker is Barbara O'Keefe, followed by Tamara Layton.
Good afternoon, Chairman Gilmetti, Honorable Commissioners, Deputy Secretary, and Director. Barbara O'Keefe, Deputy Director for Tehama County Transportation Commission, on behalf of Gary Antone, Director, Transportation Commission, Executive Director. Thank you for this opportunity. I amplify and echo the positive comments regarding the outreach and energy and hard work done by CTC and Caltrans staff. Also to the agency, we thank you, Brian, and all the efforts of the agency and the broad collaborative outreach that has extended to the stakeholders beyond the transportation community. And this is a big success, and certainly the administration recognizes that. And for those reasons, we are hopeful that maybe the legislature would be responsive for returning the savings to this program. There's a lot of good work to be done. Tomorrow I have an opportunity to represent the RTIP for Tehama County. We have a state highway project. Most of the state highways in the rural counties lack bicycle and pedestrian facilities. So this is an outstanding program, and we very much look forward to it. I support staff's recommendations. As a member of the North State Super Region and Rural Counties Task Force, we have provided letters, and we support those letters. So thank you very much, and we look forward to this outstanding program.
Thank you, Barbara. Any questions? Thank you. Tamara, followed by Erica Whitcomb.
I'm Tamara Layton, Executive Director of the Del Norte Local Transportation Commission. I'm here to support the staff recommendations for the Active Transportation Program. In addition, I do support the Rural Counties Task Force letter that was submitted, the North State Super Region letter that was submitted. I'm especially supportive of the 10% set aside for rural and small urban areas. I believe the match that's recommended in the staff recommendations is appropriate, and I absolutely believe that a minimum project size of $250,000 is necessary for small rural communities such as Del Norte to have a project at all. So thank you for your time and attention today.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, the next speaker is Erica Whitcomb, followed by Wendy Alphin.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Erica Whitcomb. I'm here on behalf of PolicyLink. We would like to thank the California Transportation Commission, agency, and department for your leadership in the implementation of this program, and also for all the opportunities to provide feedback. We do have a couple of suggestions for strengthening the guidelines to ensure that disadvantaged communities fully share in the benefits of the program. First off, based on the current definition for disadvantaged communities in the guidelines, they are home to a little over 42% of the state's population. Therefore, we are in support of what was previously mentioned, that adding in the wording minimum to the 25% allocation will signal and encourage MPOs and applicants to not only that exceeding the 25% is not only allowable but encouraged, and will be critical for ensuring that their need for investment in these communities is adequately met. We also ask that if an MPO elects to require matching funds, that disadvantaged communities and Safe Routes to School projects are exempted. The lowest income communities that represent our areas of highest need will not be able to have access to the program if matching requirements are required for them. Also, within the scoring criteria section, we recommend that more comprehensive language and evaluation questions be included that requires applicants to thoroughly indicate how projects will clearly target and provide a benefit to disadvantaged communities, and applicants should speak to how their project increases access to active transportation for the most vulnerable residents and addresses the specific infrastructure, safety, and public health challenges faced by these places. And similarly, the same section should also ask applicants to describe how community residents and stakeholders were consulted in the development of the project and what steps were taken to ensure that all residents were able to participate in that planning process. Further, we appreciate the use of strong definitions for disadvantaged communities in the statewide program. However, we believe that if MPOs are using different criteria, that different criteria should only be permitted if it was vetted through a public participation process for a regional transportation plan in compliance with federal Title VI requirements. And lastly, based on the amount of need for active transportation infrastructure, not only in disadvantaged communities, school communities, and all communities across the state, we were disappointed with the low investment of $9 million proposed for this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, the next speaker is Wendy, followed by Laura Cohen.
Thank you, Commissioners, agency staff, Caltrans Director, and CTC Caltrans staff. My name is Wendy Alfson. I work with California Walks, which is a statewide network of local groups who support walking and pedestrian safety and are affiliated about almost 1 million people across the state. I want to really support our organization, strongly supports the staff recommendation and the positions taken with regard to the request that the funding. I just wanted to point out that, at least my understanding, is that the federal law requires competitive funding only, and that the only way I could see that you could change that, as the regions are requesting, to use projects that are already programmed in the STIP, is to swap out all the federal money for state transportation money, and I think a decision has been made not to do that. And the regions originally in the program asked for all the TAP money. So I really wanted to support the staff recommendation because it does reflect input of thousands of people across the state who participated in these workshops, mostly directly, and the MPOs and RTPAs fully responded. I know it's easier for them not to do a competitive program. In terms of the timing, I would suggest that the regional programs evaluate all the applications, including those that have gone to the state, and rank them. Then they have several months, and then they can strike from the ranking any that are funded by the state, and they'll have a list, and they'll only need an extra week or two. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, the next speaker is Laura Cohen, followed by Jake Ferrara.
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Cohen. I represent Rails to Trails Conservancy, a national nonprofit that works on creating active transportation networks. Thanks for the opportunity to comment and to participate in this really excellent job by the staff in doing their outreach. We really appreciate it. A couple of simple comments and then a couple of suggestions for the larger program. One, we'd like to just see a clarification that special districts are eligible applicants. Secondly, we'd like to see request that the match for recreational trails projects, which tend to be smaller projects, that can be partially met by soft match. And third, we really appreciated from the beginning working closely with the Transportation Agency, with Brian Annis and Brian Kelly, who devoted probably more time than they anticipated to discussing this very popular idea, and for their willingness to create a more visible program to highlight active transportation and really do something bold in California. We really appreciate that statement, and consistent with that, we'd love to see this program really become a showcase nationally. I think it could be that, and as we look to federal reauthorization of the transportation bill, we'd like to see them looking to California for great ideas. We think a couple of things would help that happen. One is to make this program as successful as possible, and would request the Commission make sufficient OA available to obligate 100% of the funds in the program. Secondly, we still the program as currently funded is still a very tiny percentage of overall transportation funding. We'd like to see, if we really want to make a difference, we need to invest more, and so we'd love to see additional investment, and perhaps some of the Prop 1B savings that you're going to discuss later today can be an option for that. And then finally, just wanted to support the recommendation that this is intended to be a competitive process. We'd like to see the projects, rather than just moved through from prior funding sources, we'd like to see them actually compete, because this is a program that has stated goals and purposes and guidelines that are different from some of the other component programs. So we'd support a competitive process. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. The next speaker is Jake, followed by Rhonda Carley.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. My name is Jake Ferreira, and I represent Mission Readiness Military Leaders for Kids. We're a national security nonprofit of over 400 retired admirals and generals across the country, 27 of whom are here in California, and they advocate for smart investments in young Americans. They were founded because there's a Department of Defense study that shows that 75% of young Americans between the ages of 17 and 24 can't qualify for military service for 3 key reasons. They're physically unfit, they're too poorly educated, or they have a criminal background. So some of these smart investments that they look at actually delve well into the ATP efforts that you've worked really, really hard on, in particular, Safe Routes to Schools. When we look at smart investments in public safety, Safe Routes to School projects can help prevent childhood obesity. So biking and walking can make a difference. We've got to get kids moving. So I appreciate the attention that you've paid to ATP, and I hope that continued investments, continued look at programs like Safe Routes to School can help make a difference and get our kids active, not just to create the opportunity for kids to potentially join the service, but they can compete in global society if they overcome the hurdles of physical obesity, they don't have a criminal background, and they have a high school diploma. So pending any questions, that concludes my comments.
Any questions? Thank you very much, Jake. Ron, followed by Jeannie Ward-Waller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I'm Ron DeCarli, Executive Director of the San Luis Obispo Council of Governments, and I'm here also to commend your staff for doing an excellent job. This was a very difficult job, a lot of really disparate comments coming in from all different positions. I think they did an excellent job putting these together and coming up with, I think, to be a very workable program. I'd like to especially support the 10% set-aside. That's critical for the smaller counties, the smaller MPOs like ours, that's lost programming authority in MAP 21, of which we used to get about $800,000 a year for transportation enhancements, and that was the mainstay construction that we had for trying to help create more sustainable communities, and now we'll be competing for that. Makes it a lot more difficult. We'd also support your staff's position on having a $250,000 minimum project size. We especially like the additional flexibility that your staff's provided for economically disadvantaged communities. Have it more on a case-by-case basis if necessary. And finally, we suggest retaining the match as originally proposed. But if indeed you decide to change that match to provide more points for the overmatching, we'd suggest you limit that to the major urban counties itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron. Any questions? The next speaker is Jeannie Ward Waller, followed by Kurt Brockke.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Jeannie Ward Waller. I'm with the Safe Routes to School National Partnership. I just want to thank you for spending so much time on this item and taking all of these comments, and thank your staff for all the work they've done on this, on creating these guidelines. It's been a pleasure, and they certainly have had a lot of meetings, so appreciate that. Also want to congratulate the new chairman, Commissioner Guardino, and appreciate your special interest in this program. I recall you came to a early work group meeting, and I know that this is an issue that's close to your heart, so appreciate that as well. I want to give a special appreciation for the consideration that Safe Routes to School projects have gotten through the guidelines process. These are very important projects. They're unique. They have a unique audience, the future traveling public. So I think giving the set aside for those projects and the really unique consideration that they have had through the guidelines is important, and I hope that that continues in future cycles as well. Also want to echo the comments that Erica from PolicyLink made earlier about the special treatment for disadvantaged communities. These communities are need a leg up to get going in a lot of our grant programs, and to be competitive, we need to give them special consideration as well. So definitely support her comments, and there are a few clarifying aspects in the guidelines that we've given to staff and comments, and appreciate their ongoing consideration of those. Also want to support the staff recommendation about concern around funding projects that have been programmed for other funds. This was intended to be a competitive program. We were involved in the legislative work group with Brian Annis and others over the last year, really, and the intent, as I understand it, for these funds is that they should be competitively awarded to projects, and so we definitely support where staff has taken that, and think that that sets a really good precedent for this program in the future as well. I wanted to let you know that the Safe Routes to School National Partnership is really working hard to get the word out about this program and that this funding is coming. I think, with the tight timeline, that's really important, especially for those small communities, the disadvantaged communities. So we are doing a series of workshops and webinars in conjunction with the Technical Assistance Resource Center at the Department of Health and several other groups around the state to let communities know this funding is coming. And I know, Mitch is supporting that and helping us and Caltrans staff as well. And finally,
you want to wrap it up, please? Thank you.
Sorry. I just wanted to echo Laura Cohen's comments about the small funding in this program, and hope that you'll continue to look towards new and increased investment in what is a program that supports really 25% of the traveling public that walk and bike on our streets. Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Kurt Brockke, followed by Patricia Chen.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I'm Kurt Brockke in OCTA's Planning Division. Happy to be here today. I have two comments for you. The first is on the allocation process. We would like to see a consolidated allocation process for these projects. It does take a lot of coordination through many different agencies. We see at least 5 agencies participating, just getting the projects ready. So anything you can do to help us really with the allocation process would be greatly appreciated. In our own example, we essentially program about $50 million a year in sales tax funds for local projects. We go to our board once, and then we have twice yearly reporting that we provide to our board and present any issues to them for course correction at that point in time. That's just one example on how we've addressed that. And I'm sure there's strategies that the staff can come up with to expedite the allocation of projects. Second, on the programming process overall, due to the nuances of federal law as well as the implementation, the fiscal year 13-14 funds will be very difficult to carry over into 14-15. They basically do need to be programmed right away and get onto projects. We stand ready to submit projects as soon as possible and would like to do so. So anything you can help us get in place to do that would be greatly appreciated. Those are my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And the last speaker is Patricia Chen.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Patricia Chen, Programming Manager with LA Metro, and Metro is pleased and excited about the new program, very important program to us, and we compliment Mitchell Weiss and other CTC staff that have made an extraordinary effort to obtain and incorporate stakeholder input. We have the following remaining comments. We urge the Commission to take the opportunity to make a small change in the evaluation criteria to maximize the benefit and reach of the ATP funds and encourage responsible project delivery by providing an incentive for increased local match. The proposed change on page 10 would be to measure the mobility benefit in relationship to ATP project cost rather than total project cost. Second, we also recommend that the Commission allow the first year of the MPO TAP funds to be released early, allowing ready-to-go ATP-eligible projects to get underway immediately and keep Californians employed. We believe that the legislation is flexible on this point. And finally, we support the streamlined and expedited allocation ideas that several agencies have mentioned. And we thank you for hearing our comments today.
Thank you, Patricia. We do have one late addition here. Renee DeVere Oki.
Sorry, I wrote the wrong tab number. Renee DeVere Oki, Sacramento Area Council of Governments. Thanks for the opportunity to comment on this. I'm going to echo the sentiments of many of the ideas that were expressed before. We are in support of the streamlined allocation approach as much as we can get there, and any opportunity to advance projects, the 13-14 year that was expressed. We also would like to express our appreciation for the continued flexibility of the NPO portion as we develop our own guidelines to go along with this program, and also wanted to express our interest in continued participation of the application development as that occurs. And that was all I had. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mitchell, do you want to respond to any or all or none?
Want is an interesting word. I'll quickly go through about a dozen, and I'll just hit them real briefly, and I'd be happy to talk about any of them, at any great length. In terms of the MPO advancing, there was some considerable discussion about that. The state law is clear that the federal funds have to go through these programs, and one of the things. So I think the statute's kind of clear, and we're doing a process that's outlined in that. So there are relatively few options outside of that. And I'm not sure. How, we developed this process, and part of it's a sequential project selection. I'm not sure how that would fit in, because it doesn't seem like those two go together with the process that the work group came up with. I would say, though, that in terms of ready-to-go projects, this program was made up of, was put together through existing programs. The biggest was the STIP-T program, which regions had not many bike and ped projects in. The Commission has said that the projects that regions have that were T projects can remain and be funded with other STIP funds in 13-14. And if they are regional priorities, can remain in the region's RTIP and in the STIP beyond 13-14. So the other big programs that were rolled into here were the Safe Routes to Schools program and the Bicycle Transportation Account program. Neither of these have calls for projects or did call for projects in 13-14. So that there's not a big list of those waiting. There are, however, a number of regions who have gone out and who have done calls for projects after this legislation was being discussed with the anticipation of something happened, and the legislation ended up perhaps being different or a different process than they might have envisioned. And I've seen some of the calls, and some of those, in fact, mention conditional calls. So some of those, this was anticipated. As was mentioned, we've been talking about this for about a year. In terms of a possible technical issue related to federal programming, we had considerable discussion about the RTPA at the RTPA meeting about this. I do not believe this is a roadblock. It certainly will require people to do something in federal programming, but it is not the hard limitation that it has sounded like in some of the discussions. We will have additional meetings with the regions to talk about it, but I don't see this as an issue that can't be overcome. There was a mention about an allocation process similar to the SHOP minor program. That's certainly an option if the Commission wishes. That, as you know, the way that works, that there's a list that comes forward. It's a specific list of projects. If there's any deviation from that list, it's got to come back to get a specific Commission action. There could be variations of that based on project size. So there certainly are things that could be done, but the process laid out that we've laid out in the draft guidelines is the process that was used for the T program. The T program is the biggest single source of funds in this project. The T program, one of the reasons the T program was brought into the STIP was because of concerns about the local delivery when it was not in the STIP, and so we've been managing it much better since it's been in the STIP. And in fact, in the last STIP cycle, we had to not program all the requests that we had for T funding. Additionally, the concern that's was raised by the legislation and is in fact in the reporting of the legislation is the timely use of funds, because the perception in many of these other programs is that there is not the project delivery. That when they didn't go through the Commission, they didn't have the scrutiny, and so that's a part of what the Commission has to report on to the legislature, is the timely use of funds for these programs. There was discussion about the process taking a long time. Certainly, bringing something before the Commission for staff's review and Commission decision adds some time to it. I like to think that time adds value. I would note a couple things. First of all, we're talking about multi-year projects, and we're talking about really the last couple of months of a multi-year process. So to be fair, it's a very small piece of the timeline. Additionally, much of the work involved is a review at Caltrans that has to be done. Someone has to go through Caltrans, and Caltrans has their fiduciary responsibility for these funds. Someone has to review at Caltrans has to review all these. Whether there may be possibilities to streamline things so that a E76 is ready to go when a funds request is submitted, there may be some opportunities to streamline there on that end. But I don't think this is a significant timing issue. There were some comments related to matching and giving additional points to changing the minimum project size. Those were all things that were subject of considerable subgroup and work group discussion, and that was what the subgroups and work groups felt were the appropriate scoring criteria, without giving too much weight or too much advantage to communities with more resources, particularly given the emphasis on disadvantaged communities in this program. Let's see, what have we got here? There was a concern about some of the MPO flexibility in terms of required match. I think one of the interesting things about this program is the guidelines do give flexibility to MPOs in a number of areas. They can propose for Commission approval, different weighting, different criteria, different match requirements, different definitions of disadvantaged communities, and over time we should be able to look back and say, Sandag did something different with their minimum project size, and how did that turn out, and is that something that we should be trying to emulate in the statewide competition? So hopefully by giving flexibility, we can encourage some innovation and take what gets learned in one area to another area. Someone mentioned they were disappointed in only $9 million being added to this. I agree. There was a comment made that we should make 100% of the OA, of obligational authority of the OA available for this program. That's a federal funding nuance, but really the federal government only lets us spend about 95% of the apportionment level. And if we're going to be, if we were to do above that 95%, it would be coming at the expense of another program. So that's why the fund estimate that was adopted by the Commission didn't include that. There was a question made about measuring the mobility benefit in terms of the active transportation program funds provided, not the total funds. What the guidelines had in the past for criteria listed both of those and not required both of those to be submitted. What I would suggest in going forward and on the list of the changes that I'd read was requiring both of those to be submitted, so that an agency should submit on three things for cost effectiveness. One is cost effectiveness in terms of the options considered. One is in terms of total project cost, and then the third one would be in terms of the application of the active transportation program funds provided. So that would be an opportunity for an agency that is putting additional funds on the project over and above the match requirement to get more points. Those are the big ones I had. I'd be happy to.
Okay. Any questions, Commissioner
Arp? Yeah, I mean, I listened to all the comments. I read the materials. We're not talking about a lot of money here, and that doesn't mean that the program's unimportant, but what it means to me, I mean, we've here on Commission have made decisions about cost overruns on projects and other decisions on the fly that were much bigger than this whole program we've been talking about for a year. It seems to me that between the CTC and Caltrans and the feds, and I don't know who else I'm leaving out, there's an awful lot of bureaucratic evaluation for this money, and if you, there's time and dollars spent in all of that. It seems to me that what's actually going to come out the other end is going to get really restricted because of all the time and effort we're spending on evaluating this. How can we streamline this so that, as it was pointed out, we're not talking interchange projects or STIP projects that probably do require a lot of this review. How can we give the regions some responsibility and accountability to move ahead, get these things out there, and let's come back in a year and see how they did. And if everybody was on the right track, then let's continue that, or let's adjust at the time. But it seems to me that we're just, God, we're spinning our wheels here. Let's get, and this, this is not any, I think our staff has done a tremendous job of reaching out and trying to get this done. But it just seems to me, we've all heard what we've heard, and everybody loves what CTC has done to reach out, and then they turn around and say, well, I think we ought to do this, this, and this. Let's get this done.
Commissioner Inman?
I have a couple comments and then a process question. I'll ask my process question first. Can we talk a little bit about the process, this motions before us today? If we agree, it goes over to the legislature and they have 45 days. Can you talk a little bit about the process?
Sure. We are required by statute to submit the guidelines. I think they said like final draft guidelines. It's worded something like that in the legislation. 45 days prior to adoption of the guidelines, we're required to adopt the guidelines on March 26, or by March 26. So we have our March 20th meeting. Backing that 45 days, we have to send the guidelines to the Joint Legislative Budget Committee on February 3rd. The action before the Commission is to, or that will be before the Commission on the next item, is to, with any changes noted, approved submittal of the draft to the Joint Legislative Budget Committee. It's not adoption of the guidelines yet. That would be coming in March.
If changes occurred during that time period, would it have to then go back to the Legislative Joint Committee, or it goes over once and then we change it later? What happens?
My interpretation is it goes over once. And I think that it has to go for a commission approval in March. The commission is always free to make changes in any of the items before them. So I think I don't see how it could possibly do anything different.
I just want to, in my comments, echo Commissioner Arp's position. It's taken us a whole bunch of discussion here, and I think the important thing is for the dollars to get out for our communities, to have the ability to participate in active transportation. I'm not sure, there seems to be dispute among what the statute specifically limits us to in terms of our MPOs are requesting to get out of the gate early. My concern with not doing that is we are in the time period when we believe the federal markup will occur this spring. And I think it's imperative for all of us to look at these programs and show some progress along those manners. Plus, we've seen the charts of the Highway Trust Fund, and we may have a great process and no money at the end of the day if we don't have a solution, a backfill in place. And I think it makes it difficult for us to remind our friend Brian that transportation funding is so important. If it takes us an elongated amount of time to actually get projects out. So I want to encourage us to do absolutely everything we can to be part of the solution. I want to be respectful of all our communities. I know we have tremendous needs everywhere. Much debate about the overmatch. I realize if I don't have a matching source, I look with envy. But from my perspective, overmatch dollars are more dollars that are actually going in to help us build active transportation projects. So I don't know what we can do with a word here and a word there without undoing all of your collective efforts, and I do want to commend you for all the time put into this. But I do think we've heard over and over again to keep it simple and get the projects built. So those are my thoughts.
Commissioner Gardino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The one item that was unanimous was to praise our staff, especially Mitch, and I hope we'll all join me in thanking Mitch. He's done just a tremendous job on this. Now, that wasn't quite with the enthusiasm that I'd hoped, but we'll work on it. We'll work on it. A couple of comments and then a series of questions, if I may, Mitch. First, it may not seem like a lot of money based on what we're used to dealing with, but for active transportation programs, $130 million a year for a minimum of 3 years is a ton of money, and a lot more than bicycling and walking communities and needs have ever had in California's history. So I would just stress that we not minimize this wonderful opportunity we have and how much money this is relative to what we're used to. Second, I hope there's agreement on the 10% set aside for small and rural counties. For a while at least, we had heard from some of our larger MPO partners a desire to be able to compete for those funds within their larger MPOs in areas that they felt were small or rural. I didn't hear anyone from larger MPOs make that comment today, and I heard from our small and rural areas their desire about keeping that part of the guidelines. I would concur. I'm channeling former Commissioner Kirk Lindsay a bit here, but it's not. It's only 10% of the whole, and I think keeping that set aside for our smaller and rural MPOs is a really strong part of the guideline. So as we move, whatever we move forward today, I just want to advocate for that. The second one, and Mitch, I'm happy to have you respond. There seems to me a lot of logic in several speakers talking about any savings return to the program. I like that too. I like rewarding cost effectiveness and returning funds when not needed and being able to stay in the ATP. Can you respond, Mitch? Because I'm hoping we can see that.
Certainly. And so there are really 3 points at which one could capture savings. One is at the time of allocation. If we program some funds based on an estimate and they come forward to allocation and they're requesting a smaller amount of money, those funds would remain in the program. It becomes more of a challenge with funds that are at award or at project completion. And the challenge we have is that in some of our programs, for example, the state-local partnership program and the bond program, that was a specific account, funds set aside for a specific program. If there were savings, they remained within each pot and were recycled, or CMIA was recycled. The funds are just within a large pool of money, and we have a budget appropriation for those. There's a limited period of time in which we can encumber the funds, in which the Commission can allocate the funds. We're typically using the oldest appropriations first. Usually when we're at the point of achieving those other savings, we're past the period for which we can make another allocation, or certainly not time to go through the programming process. If it were a separate fund, like the bicycle transportation account was, then you're in a position to see, when you do a fund estimate, this is the beginning, this is how much cash we have uncommitted, we could use it. It's just, I think, more a technical thing of how the program is set up.
Okay. I'm hoping there are creative ways to address that. I just had some questions and comments, if I may, Mr. Chair. If we can walk through this, Mitch?
Yes.
On page 3, when we're talking about small and rural, in the middle of the page, right above the matching requirements part, in the initial program, a minimum of $24 million per year of the statewide competitive program is available for safe routes to school. Schools with at least $7.2 million for non-infrastructure grants, including funding for a state technical assistance resource center. $7.2 million is a lot of this portion of funds for not actual improvements.
That's the amount.
Is that a must
that's
do
amount.
Or a may do?
It's a must. That's the amount in the appropriation, in the statute.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry to hear that, but thank you for explaining it. Right underneath that line, it talks about the matching requirements, and the source of the matching funds may be any combination of local, state, or federal funds. Can matching funds also be private funds?
Sure. I don't know why not.
Can we
can change that.
Can we add that to the
Yes.
guidelines?
Definitely.
So that we can encourage private funds or nonprofit funds, non-public funds to come in?
Yeah, we can say private, definitely.
Okay, great. And state. In some of our programs, we've actually shied away from, if you're getting state funds, using other state funds as your match, and in this one we're saying it's okay. Could you elaborate on why we're comfortable with other state funds matching this program?
Well, the reason that was put in was not so much for other transportation funds, but for there's public health. Some of these projects, one of the goals of the program is public health.
Yes.
So there's possible that public health or state park funding or other program dollars. It's actually going to be more challenging to match it with state transportation dollars, just because of the timing of the program. It's going to be very difficult to, for example, match it with STIP funds.
Okay, thank you. Page 6, example projects. Bullet 6, secure bicycle parking at employment centers. Does it make those employment center facilities open to the general public? Okay, good. Because that would be a question that Lucy and I and others in the private sector would be asked instantly, so thank you. On page 10, Caltrans shall develop a benefit cost model for infrastructure and non-infrastructure active transportation projects. By when?
As soon as possible. I don't have a deadline. That's Malcolm's staff, and he has a economics unit. I'm sure he would have to talk to them. They have a benefit cost model that we use in the STIP and have used in a number of other programs that addresses state highway projects. There are benefit cost models that try to address active transportation projects, but we felt it was a benefit for Caltrans to take a look at those, see what they can put together from what's out there, and come up with something that we have a standardized view of. I'm not sure how long it will take them to do it.
Okay. I only have two more comments. Page 15. Caltrans is going to audit a selection of projects, which I think is wise and appropriate. Are they reporting back to the Commission annually as they do those audits?
I think that we have that somewhere in here, but I can't tell you what page it's on. At page 15, the last sentence of the top paragraph, a report on the projects audited must be submitted to the Commission annually.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Last one, and this may be a longer sidebar conversation if that's okay with our Executive Director, Mitch, and you. But the design standards on page 19, I'd like to stress flexibility, and it may be, again, a longer conversation. There's a lot of work with cities about trying to make our design standards more flexible. We ran into this in San Jose with an improvement at Yerba Buena and Highway 101. It was very, there was a lot of rigidity there that made it very hard to make the safety improvements for bicycle ped work. Malcolm, perhaps it's a longer conversation, but I think it's one that we need to have.
No, I would welcome that conversation. I think we're already sinking our teeth into evaluating NACTO guidelines and where they would line up with our existing guidelines. And I also suspect that tomorrow when the SSTI report comes out, it's going to speak to this as well, and we'll put an action plan together. So I look forward to following up with that.
I just want to say publicly how much I appreciate, Malcolm, how open you've been to discussing the NACTO guidelines. So with the permission of the Chair and our Executive Director, I'd love to be a part of that conversation.
Okay, Commissioner Burke.
Thank you. I just want to get an understanding of the time frame. Because if you go through the dates and the time, and if you're going to complete it by the end of 2014, it seems that these would have to be already ready-to-go projects, and I wonder about some of the small entities, how they would be able to put all of this together, or is it anticipated that ultimately the grant might go into the next year? Just the review process and the evaluating process when you start in March pushes it really far down. Caltrans has to go through it, and if it's not absolutely ready, and particularly in a small community or even the small projects that are going through the regional, what if there are environmental issues and all of these things? How do they get through this at the end of the year, or do you anticipate these are going to be segmented?
Well, I guess the shortest answer to this is these are going to be projects that are going to be coming for allocation in 14, 15, and 15, 16.
Okay.
So it's
all
not
right.
something
it will
that has
be
to be done right
segmented.
away. Yes.
And the process for the actual grant might be segmented also, or will it be completed in 14?
So they'll have as much time as they ask for, essentially. There are certain time frames in the guidelines that funds have to be used within, but that's really about the initial allocation, project readiness, and then each individual project will have its timeline. I would anticipate that most of what we're talking about in this initial program is construction for funding. It is possible that someone comes in for program pre-construction or multiple components of the projects, but I would assume that it's not as competitive if construction isn't included. And so in an instance where they're doing multiple phases, we would make the individual allocations for each phase.
For each phase.
Right. Commissioner Medapper.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. A couple of these items I brought up at the hearing in Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago, but I do want to get some answers on them. And again, I want to echo the comments made earlier, and thanks to Mitch and also what Commissioner Inman indicated. I mean, this is you know, in the process, seeing where this is going and how quickly this is coming back, and that's kind of where I'm at on a couple of the concerns. First of all, on the schedule, right now it's set as, and I think one of the speakers today talked about having only 40 days for MPOs to do an evaluation. And so, Mitch, the fact that you know, the idea being maybe we should move the MPO programming recommendations to the Commission from September 30th to October 30th. And I think, as you recall, I brought up the other day my concern that right now CTC is showing to a review evaluation of MPO projects in November, and we don't even have a November meeting scheduled. So maybe we'll schedule one for this purpose. But I just am listening to the comments of the MPOs concerned about a short window, and I'd like to know why we couldn't just move the date from September 30th to October 30th.
Well, let me start off by saying it's the Commission's pleasure, so you can move the date to whatever date you would like it to be. I think it's a legitimate concern. That's why we wrote into the guidelines that when the applications are submitted to Caltrans, they also go to the MPO in which it's located, so that the MPO has all the applications from the get-go, you know, recognizing that there's going to be, you know, several months where they wouldn't know which one is going to be in the statewide program and which one might not be. I think that the only challenge in pushing the timeline out, and we might have to, you know, we might on the statewide piece find that we just don't have enough, you know, we get 1,000 applications and we just can't do it in the time we thought we could. But the challenge we have in pushing it out is we're going to have to start the next program very quickly. We have to, by law, adopt the 2015 program by April 1st of 2015, which really means we're adopting guidelines for that program about the time we're adopting this program here. So what I'm really hoping to do is avoid an overlap in call for projects. I think that's the main thing, is we want, whatever timeline we set out, we want to try to select the projects for the first cycle before we start asking people to send us projects for the second cycle. And it's going to be a significant challenge no matter what the dates are.
Well, again, I'm just listening to the MPOs. They're the ones that are going to have to do this, and if they're saying it's not realistic, it might make sense that the date get changed to October 30th. Also, with respect to the dollar amounts, and I'm definitely sensitive to Commissioner Guardino's comments regarding the smaller, the rural areas, and I want to ask this again on the record just because I want to have your explanation on the record. You know, $250,000 seems like a small amount given when you federalize a project, how much money gets sucked up just in that process. On a statewide project, why would we not be instead at $500,000 or a more reasonable number? And I believe you said because you don't have many projects at $500,000 on a statewide basis, but I still am sensitive. We've already heard what a small amount of money this is dealing with. I think we want to try to get as much program and delivered as possible, and if everything has to get federalized, then it just gets sucked up into and less goes into the communities.
Sure, and that's certainly a challenge. There are a couple things I would note. First of all, MPOs have the flexibility for their piece to come up with a higher minimum. So if they wanted $500,000, if they wanted $1 million, whatever they need.
So MPOs can do that.
MPOs can do that. Okay. One of the statutory requirements we're all under is to implement a broad selection of projects that benefit a broad spectrum of users, I think is how the statute exactly words it. So there needs to be some sensitivity that some of these projects are, in fact, smaller projects. In some of these programs, the Safe Routes to School program, a traffic light may only cost, a few $100,000, or striping is certainly less than that. So I think that's an area we need to have some concern about. But by giving the MPOs flexibility, we could see if Sandag wanted to do a minimum project size of $500,000, and they were able to still show that they have a broad spectrum of projects, then I think that's where we can take a lesson learned and move it forward. I'd also say the average project size in the previous programs was usually under $500,000, and most of those programs were federally funded.
Okay, my last item, just to pick up on your theme of efficiency for the MPOs, and something that might save 2 to 3 months to the process, is you haven't provided for a lump sum allocations. As long as projects are consistent with the goals, there wouldn't be any need to go back to the last step. Funding could be done similar to other programs that Caltrans does, and I think that's something they could save several months. And I heard a couple of folks testify today making the request for lump sum allocation. Again, why do we want to add so much onto this process that could be so much simpler?
Well, first of all, we're talking about a small period of time in a many-year process, and the Commission's step in that is not a long part of the step. The submittal of a funds request, the evaluation of a funds request, the evaluation of E76 by FHWA, all that stuff has to occur. The getting on the Commission agenda, which goes out a couple of weeks before the meeting, is not the big part of the process. Everybody else who has dollars in the game wants to evaluate the projects, and so I don't think we are the big time impediment in terms of the lump sum allocation. The programs that we have traditionally done lump sums are non-competitive programs. RSTP, CMAQ, where the Commission has no discretion in project selection. And in those type of programs, I completely agree that those should be, we don't have guidelines telling people what projects to pick. Those should be, why would we want to vote on all those? When the Commission has discretion, though, when we're setting the guidelines, when we're the ones held accountable by the legislature for delivering the program, for the performance of the program, then I think it's important that we know what the projects are. Even with reporting, we don't get the level of detail. The projects don't see the same level of scrutiny. We've had small STIP projects which are the subject of Commission discussion because of one issue or another with the project. I'm sure any number of commissioners can name any number of STIP projects because they come through here and we see them. I doubt any of us could come up with what a CMAQ project is anywhere in the state because we don't see them. There's not the same level of openness and transparency through the state.
Okay, Commissioner Dunn.
Yes, thank you. Very quickly, I'm going to echo my colleagues' comments on keeping it simple. 5-agency review is crazy. Getting it started quickly, and I also support a lump sum allocation of some time for such a small funding mechanism. However, the one thing we haven't really talked about, Mitch, that I would love to chat with you about is the aspect that one of the top program goals of this matter is greenhouse gas reduction under SB 375. We're probably, I could be a smart aleck and say we're probably expending more greenhouse gases than we'd ever save just going through the process of all of this. But I won't say that, for the record. Instead, I would like to ask your thoughts on the project reporting. I get the recreational aspect of bicycling and walking. I get all that. One of the greenhouse gas reduction items that I'm particularly interested in is moving a bike to work, walk to school. I see every day lines of SUVs dropping off their kids at schools, watching all those cars, emissions go. So, and yet in the project reporting, we talk about performance outcomes from the project, which just include bicycle and pedestrian counts, and not the type of bicycle and pedestrian counts. In other words, just increasing recreational use, fabulous for obesity reduction, fabulous for health. Get that. But from a greenhouse gas reduction of taking traffic off of streets, because, ladies and gentlemen, we are impacting our road capacity now, and we don't have money for road capacity improvements, I want to make sure that we are taking cars off the streets, if in fact that's a goal, but with bike to work. And I'd love to be able to see a measurement from a greenhouse gas reduction aspect on a breakdown. Do you see what I'm trying to say? I get all the recreational stuff, but if we're going to impact our road capacity by adding capacity, rightfully so, to active transportation, is there a way to measure the greenhouse gas reduction of that? I don't want to add to the burden on reporting, but I just thought it was a curious aspect that it wasn't specifically called out in the guidelines, and we all just presume greenhouse gas reduction. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah. So anyway, I won't say another word.
Commissioner Dunn, I couldn't agree more. If we have limited sources, even if it is bigger than we're normally getting for active transportation, having this impact congestion greenhouse gas, I hope, is going to be the emphasis rather than the wonderful trail and type of facility.
It's either real or it's not real, and
right.
I just want real metrics, not just feel-good stuff. So, thanks.
Commissioner Simi?
I just want to thank everybody for their input on this program. It's a great program. I want to echo some of the comments made by my colleagues. The paths to schools, and especially the disadvantaged communities program. Central California, unfortunately, suffers from one of the highest unemployment rates and poverty rates in the state. Some communities over 50%. So I'm very excited about this new program. The dollar amounts are not high, but I want to also echo Commissioner Arp's comments. Let's get the money out as fast as we can. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're done finally. So moving on to item number 16.
We have to vote on this, sir?
Mitchell, we're going to item 16.
Oh, 16.
Yes, item 16 is the action item related to this. I would note there is a pink which has a draft dated January 17th. This was went out to the commissioners and the rest of the world on that date, but the book had to be published before that, so it contained an older draft. What we're recommending is that the Commission approve the submittal of the draft guidelines to the Joint Legislative Budget Committee, noting any specific changes and delegating to staff the authority to make any minor corrections. In terms of specific changes, I would note, I can go over the list very quickly again that we had read earlier. There's under distribution on page 3, clarifying a minimum of 25% for disadvantaged communities. Under matching requirements and funding for active transportation plans, add the word predominantly to benefiting a disadvantaged community or predominantly disadvantaged. In the matching requirement, add private dollars. In partnering with implementing agencies, clarifying that the MOU must be submitted with a request for allocation. In scoring criteria, we didn't ask for information on everything we talked about, and clarifying that applications must quantify the safety and mobility benefit in relation to both the total project costs and to the funds provided. Clarify under roles and responsibilities that MPO must notify the Commission of their intent to do a supplemental call no later than May 21st. And two things under active transportation plans on page 17, clarify that an active transportation plan integrated into a general plan needs to be compliant with the Complete Streets Act. And on page 18, in coordination with jurisdictions, add school districts within the plan area to the list requiring coordination. That said,
how about a motion?
staff recommends approval.
I would move. I would move the staff recommendation, though, with the change on page 3 that I mentioned about private funds.
Yes, and I read that in the list.
And, thank you. And on page 10, clarification as to when Caltrans will have the cost-benefit information. And that we note that we want to discuss on the side the flexibility, the NACTO items on the design standards. And with that, I would make the motion.
A motion by Commissioner Gardino, a second by Commissioner Tavaloni. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Well done, Mitch.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Sure.
We heard simple and speed, so during this time where it's going to the legislature, can we continue to encourage everybody to put their heads together to help us be?
Yes, I would like nothing more than holding more work group meetings.
No, I'm not suggesting more work meetings, but
No, I mean to be focused on that. Really, I think to be fair to the process, I think we need to include everybody who has participated in this, who cares about the projects. It's not just the MPOs who have a stake. It's it's a Safe Route to Schools proponents who didn't have a call for projects who want to have their projects considered. So, but we will definitely, meet and I committed to doing this with RTPAs. Is think about how we can work through some of these issues between now and the next commission meeting.
thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? All right. I just want to remind my fellow commissioners, we only have this room until 5 o'clock, and we have 70-some-odd items to get through. So, all right. We've done item 17. Item 18, California Transportation Infrastructure.
Before we go there, can we take Hassan?
Okay. Excuse me. We're going to have a brief presentation by Hassan with regard to transportation funding concepts. He's got to catch an airplane.
Thank you, Commissioner, for allowing me to speak early. I actually, the purpose of me coming today, stand before you as a professional who for 25 years talk about the same subject. Where are we going to get the next dollar to fund our transportation system? And in the last regional transportation plan that we adopted last year, we took a very brave measure. By some, by other is a crazy one. And we actually did say and outline what we think our transportation funding should look like. Today you're going to hear from Undersecretary Brian Annis, and you're going to hear from the experiment in Oregon. But by 2025, this is no rocket science, by 2025, 80% of the revenues that comes from gasoline tax will be gone due to efficiency in vehicles and meeting the CAFE standard. This is no longer a research exercise. This is real stuff. 80% is a lot of money. Since the 1980s in our Southern California region, our county commission has been putting sales taxes to fill the gap. But how much more can they fill the gap for a system that your commission put a report out, says a 10-year assessment of $296 billion under preservation and maintenance. And when we talked in the regional transportation plan about innovative ideas like vehicle mile travel tax, boy, the newspaper had a field day. Black boxes and call us all kinds of names, and I cannot repeat in public. But the bottom line is this. There is a perception and there is reality. The reality is we need to do something. And if it is not vehicle mile travel fee, then put something on the table that works, that generates revenues. We have to fill the gap. I ask you to be leaders and start really talking about how we're going to fund the transportation system in this region. The regional transportation plan specifically said we're not going to do this overnight. We're not going to shift from gasoline taxes to vehicle mile travel or other forms in 1 or 2 years. In the regional transportation plan, we said if we do that, we need until 2025. But between now and 2025, we need to fill the gap. We need at least 15 cents per gallon gasoline increase in that period to just maintain what we have today. And then hopefully our state will join the other states that have demonstrations, and figure out a way to move forward. But make no mistake about it. We can say that, well, we'll figure out something. It is a lot of money we're talking about. It's a great need that we're talking about. And I am pleased to tell you that in the Southern California region, which is conservative in nature, the plan was passed without any objection with this in mind, that we're going to move to a different form. The time is now, not later. And it is time to take facts as opposed to perception. People think about privacy and all that. These are all perceptions. The fact is we need a user form fee that brings revenue to fix the system and expand it, because that system is the engine for economic development in the state. So I hope through the discussion today we will have a great moving forward initiative to really truly talk about the transportation system and its need and where the money is going to come from. And I thank you for allowing me to speak before you before I get in my plane. Thank you.
Thank you, Hassan. Any questions? Okay, now we'll move on to item 18, California Transportation Infrastructure Priorities. Brian?
Great. Thank you, and I will try to be brief. This update has to do with what the governor put in last year's budget. In last January 10th's budget, the governor asked the secretary to form a work group to look at transportation priorities, to try to refine those priorities, and to try to come up with some long-term pay-as-you-go revenue options. So the secretary throughout the year, throughout last year, did hold work group meetings. We expect to put out a brief report next week that summarizes the vision that the group has come up with, and also to articulate some short-term and longer-term measures to start addressing some of these transportation needs. Let me just spend a minute talking about the vision that the group endorsed. We tried to look into the future, and one of the members did suggest, it's really essential to articulate the vision. So looking into the transportation system in the decades ahead, one of the key issues that the group decided on was that we really need to focus on our existing infrastructure and make sure that existing infrastructure allows for the efficient flow of people and goods, and that it be well maintained and operate at peak efficiency. That was one of the components. Also, the transportation system of the future should provide fast, clean, efficient, and convenient alternatives to vehicular traffic and provide cleaner vehicles on our roads. So that's an objective, I think, that fits both the interregional transportation system and the regional transportation system. Lastly, our state and local transportation investments must yield a single transportation system to meet our shared objectives. There's a lot of responsibility, a lot of ownership that's dispersed with different responsible parties, but these systems do have to work together to really achieve our goals and provide for maximum efficiency. Because I'm trying to be brief here. We already talked about the budget. I will mention that I think the efforts of the group did help shape some of the budget that was built in for the request for 14-15. One of the things we didn't have much discussion of before was that we're attempting to fully appropriate all the remaining Prop 1B bond funds. It happens most of the remaining funds are in the transit area, local transit and intercity rail areas, so we're happy that the budget proposes to fully appropriate those. Some of the longer term things or further work ahead, I'm going to focus on those things that maybe get touched upon later in today's agenda or tomorrow. Hassan, of course, just went through the mileage-based user fee concept, and that's something that we're endorsing as well as a worthy effort by Caltrans and the CTC to really learn about what's possible in this area. I know when I first heard about this concept several years ago, I was with a group of rural counties, and they were they were bringing up concerns about privacy issues. And what I've learned initially from Oregon's experiment is there are some ways, some technologies to address some of these privacy concerns, and perhaps even multiple options for users to choose from if they prefer one instead of the other. So again, we support that effort of the department. Secondly, I know the commission will start hearing the STIP and the different, not just the local RTIPs, but the state interregional program. And we do certainly want to continue working with all parties going forward on whether we're getting that right. I saw one observation that the rail program, for example, is at near the statutory minimum. And, that may or may not be the place to be, but certainly want to make sure that as the future STIPs are developed, we don't target the statutory minimum as the level to plan for, that we really look at, how we can best direct those dollars. Some of the other areas, just briefly, Commissioner Inman mentioned the National Freight Committee. We, of course, also have the State Freight Committee. We want to make sure that any input that's coming out of those groups gets discussed collectively in our ongoing CTIP effort to make sure we're moving forward with the recommendations that those groups come out with. As far as local revenues, folks might have noticed in a non-transportation part of the governor's budget, the administration's endorsing changes to infrastructure finance districts. That's has some similarities to redevelopment agencies. It uses the tax increment financing. That's by current state statute. Currently, those can be instituted at the local level with the 2/3 vote. The governor's proposing to reduce that to a 55% local vote, and he's also expanding the types of projects that could move forward with infrastructure finance districts. So transportation projects are included in that financing mechanism. Going forward, we do want to continue the discussion of lowering the threshold for local measures. That's something that is probably a broader discussion. Housing interest, other economic development interest are interested in that as well. So it's probably something that doesn't go forward with a transportation-only focus. But as that discussion continues, certainly want to engage on how that transportation component could best be placed within such an initiative. Let me just check. I believe I've covered most everything, but again, the interim report we expect to put out next week, and I suspect Brian Kelly, once that's out, can have a more detailed discussion at a commission meeting and better articulate the various recommendations. But again, I want to thank everyone that participated over the last year, and it, I think, was helpful again with the budget, and the work continues. So thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions of Brian? Staff will get a copy.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item number 19, status of fuel taxes. Stephen?
Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. Stephen Keck with Caltrans. It's actually quite a pleasure to be here today presenting this. This is a presentation that I've wanted to make for a very long time, and I think it'll be worth everyone's time. It might take 10 minutes to get through, but I think it's worth it. As Undersecretary Annis just mentioned, we will be looking into a mileage-based user fee system. We're going to explore it, find out what can be done. We're going to hear from James Whitty from Oregon here in just a few minutes. What I hope to do today is to make everybody understand why that's an important thing to do. And I'm going to do that by going through the history of the gas tax and looking at the future of the gas tax. And then you can make up your own mind what we need to do about that when we get there. The excise tax on gasoline, there's several taxes, and I'm going to detail those in the next slide. But the base excise tax, which is the only tax on gasoline available for maintenance and operations of the highway system, has been in place since 1923. It was last increased in 1994. 1994 was, as it happens, 20 years ago. So this is the 20th anniversary of the last gas tax increase. There'll be more on that in a couple slides later, but that happens to be a record. It's quite a a month for records. Record number of hot days, record number of days without rain, and of course now it's the record period of time we haven't had a gas tax increase. The chart details the whole history of the gas taxes. You'll see some changes in there, a penny here, a penny there, recognizing that percentage-wise, that's a 50% increase in 1927. That's a 30% increase in 1983. That's almost double in 1990. So there are huge increases over time in terms of the different tax increases. But as I mentioned, nothing since 1994. There are, however, several other taxes on gasoline, and I'm going to very briefly talk about where they come from and what they do. There's the base excise tax, 18 cents. There's the price-based excise tax, which is currently 21.5 cents per gallon. That is a replacement for sales tax. Now, sales tax was collected on gasoline since 1971 and has been applied more or less on and off to transportation since 2000. So it's incorporated into our base now as a price-based excise tax. There's a federal excise tax of 18.4 cents, and I'm going to turn around and point at Vince, who's not there. Oh, he moved. It's a shame. Their gas tax has not changed significantly since for 21 years, so in 1993. So they're even worse off than we are. And actually, I think Athena's the last slide showed the dire straits that they're in. And finally, there is still a sales tax charge for local purposes on gasoline. We did get rid of the state sales tax, but there is a local component. And those sales taxes generally go for local general purposes, not necessarily related to transportation. So it's a lot of taxes, adds up to about 70 cents per gallon. It is the highest in the nation, but I want to try to compare this to other things that we pay for in our daily lives. Some things that people would consider to be essential for life. Cable. Average, this is a national average cable bill, will run you over $1,000 a year for basic services. This does not include HBO or any of the fun stuff. A single cell phone plan per year runs $850 is the national average per year. If you like to go to Starbucks or another national chain, it costs you about $3.25 per trip. That happens to also be the national average, $780 a year. Internet service, and this is not the high-speed internet, this is just the basic internet, $540 a year. Total gas taxes, 70 cents. Everything that you pay for, the state tax, the federal tax, the sales tax, and the excise base tax. Per year, about $368. So you're paying $368 a year to drive on the system, for the bus to drive on the system, for the railroad tracks the train drives on. All of that boils down to that tiny little piece. Probably the most important piece of infrastructure in your lives, that's how much you pay for it.
Based on how many miles are you looking at?
I have that written down here. It's based on 12,500 miles a year, which is the California average. It's also based on like 22 point something miles per gallon, which is the average.
22?
It's the average current miles per gallon. So that's a very interesting perspective, and I'll move on to this next chart. That does happen to be pavement in the background of that chart. At first, I thought it was a spider web. Inflation. Let's talk about inflation. The last gas tax increase was 1994. This green line here represents the Consumer Price Index, which, of course, is an index tied to the cost of goods and services on a very broad base. Over the years, it's eroded much of the value of that 18 cents. It's now worth 11.5 cents in 1994 dollars. So we've lost a considerable amount of buying power just based on CPI. This purple line, a little more volatile, is the State Highway Construction Cost Index. So this is what it costs Caltrans to build highways. It has gone up and down. You can see a huge spike there in the early 2000s when you had a lot of competition with housing. Prices went way up. Prices alleviated a little bit. But if you use this index, which is more indicative of what it costs to build and maintain roads, the value of that tax is now 10.5 cents, almost half the value. If you also want to take into account, though, another piece that we just talked about, thanks to Commissioner Seamy's question, gas mileage has also been increasing over time. If you adjust for both inflation and increased fuel efficiency in our vehicles, we actually come out at almost half of the value of what it was in 1994. So in other words, instead of that 18 cents that sounded very nice in 1994, you can really think of that as about 9 cents in 1994 dollars. So we're kind of back where we were before we increased that tax to begin with. This is a chart that I've shown to the Commission before. It's here to remind us that we have seen decreases in actual fuel consumption over the last 4 years or 5 years since the beginning of the Great Recession. The amount that we collect on gas and diesel taxes is about $340 million a year less now than it was in 2006-07 before the recession. That's due for two reasons. One, people are driving less because at least through 2012-13, unemployment was still double digits in California. And of course, we do have cars that get better and better gas mileage. So what does this mean? And how does it work for the future? If gas mileage never changed again, then the amount of revenue that we collect would increase with the vehicle miles traveled. In this chart, that's represented by the Hummer. I think that's a Hummer, climbing the big green hill there. It doesn't matter if you think VMT is going to grow or decline or stay flat. The revenues would keep pace with VMT, up or down. The orange line, and that's my favorite color, represents what happens as CAFE standards are introduced and vehicle mileage or vehicle efficiency increases. So I don't know if everybody's completely aware. I think we talked about it a bit during the fund estimate. But current CAFE standards are looking at 55 to 56 miles per gallon by 2030, and in some cases before 2030. That's a huge increase. It's more than double what your average is now. So as we look at that, and those cars begin to come into the market, and for the fund estimate, we estimated 2 to 3% per year, which is not a lot of replacement, but that's what we estimated. You begin to see less and less fuel used for more and more or the same amount or whatever amount of miles. They just use fewer gallons of gasoline. So as long as we continue to rely on taxing gasoline to pay for our system, there's an impact. And what that impact is, did you unplug the sound? Because I don't want this to make a sound, because this would have made a sound. Oh, it still makes a sound. The car drives off the cliff. $16 billion lost. And I think Hassan actually kind of stole my thunder a little bit with this one. This is almost half of the revenue between now and 2030 will be lost through just fuel efficiency. We're not talking inflation anymore. This is just fuel efficiency. It'll only be a few years out before fuel efficiency losses begin to overtake inflationary losses. So I'm not going to say what we need to do. That's something that we're going to have a larger conversation about. But this is the picture I want to leave everybody with. This is the future of the excise taxes as they stand now. And that's the Bay Bridge. Any questions?
Any questions of Stephen?
Just
Commissioner Arp?
great presentation, great slides. I want a digital copy of this so I can plagiarize it as much as possible.
This and any of my previous presentations will be available in a collector's book. And no, yeah. It is, of course, this will be available on our website as well as a link to the Commission website, I'm sure.
I think this should be delivered to each member of the Senate Transportation Committee as well as the Assembly Transportation Committee.
Absolutely. I look forward to giving a similar presentation in those venues as well. This is something that I've been waiting to do for a very long time.
Any other questions of Stephen? Okay, moving on. We are, in the sake of time, we're going to defer items number 21 and 23. We'll move on to items 20. Transportation funding concept, Susan?
Commissioners, agenda item 20 is a presentation from the Jim Whitty, Oregon Department of Transportation is here to provide an overview for you of the activities of Oregon and with respect to vehicle miles traveled, a fee. Just real quick, I wanted to the reason for this presentation is the Commission over the years has made numerous recommendations to the legislature and the administration and also working together with the Tri-State Commissions, Washington and Oregon also made recommendations, all with respect to the need for alternatives to the existing funding sources that we have for transportation, and that includes a vehicle miles travel fee. James Whitty, I want to give you a brief bio. He is the manager of the Office of Innovative Partnerships and Alternative Funding at the Oregon Department of Transportation. He has led Oregon's efforts to develop and implement a new vehicle miles travel revenue system. His work culminated in the successful completion of 2 per-mile charge pilot programs in 2007 and 2013. His work led to the passage of road use charging legislation in 2013, enacting implementation of a road usage charge system for 5,000 volunteers. He is a founder of the Western Road Usage Charge Consortium, consisting of states engaging in road usage charge information transfer and joint research. And I would like to point out today, Norma Ortega was planning to provide a presentation on California's efforts with respect to the Western Road Usage Charge Consortium. Given the time constraints, we'll bring her back for a presentation at a future meeting. James Whitty is also founder and vice chairman of the Mileage-Based User Fee Alliance, a mission of educating policymakers headquartered in Washington, D.C. He brings a private sector perspective, having 10 years experience in transportation finance and environmental policies for Associated Oregon Industries, the Portland Chamber of Commerce, and 6 years in private law practice. With that, I'll turn it to James for a presentation.
Welcome.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, I'm pleased to be here and I have the opportunity to brief you on our work. I'm not going to go through the full 12-year history of what we've been working on, but we have achieved some success recently, and that's what I'm going to talk about. So really it's about 2 years. We have the same problem you do. I've spoken across the country. Every state has the same problem you do with transportation taxes. Fortunately for the state of Oregon, the legislature 12 years ago passed a bill to figure out what to do about it. They were looking ahead. You don't always see that, but they were looking ahead. They saw the new vehicles coming into the marketplace, very new ones. The hybrid was new back in 2001. They had concept vehicles for fuel cells and natural gas and the electric vehicle. Of course, some of those vehicles are now becoming more common on our roads. So they created the Road User Fee Task Force to develop a new revenue system, and the idea was a per-mile charge. They also directed the Oregon Department of Transportation to run pilot programs based on the policies adopted by the task force, which is what we've been doing. The first pilot project was exciting. It was a pay-at-the-pump model. It worked, but there was one problem with it. You took a bunch of smart people, including engineers, you put them in the back room, and they create it by themselves. They bring it out and say, "Isn't this wonderful?" We tested it. It worked. Public did not like it. It was a vertical process, top down. You know, we know better than everybody. We didn't really get to any movement, policy movement, until we went to a vertical process, which is listen to what the public is complaining about the first pilot, and try to fix it using their input. So the second pilot it's an open system pilot, essentially using the internet cloud, okay? And the open system is important because that allows choices for the motorists. The motorists today, or really the people today, like choices. They choose their phones. They're not stuck with a box that the phone company sends you. Remember those days? They don't do that anymore. They have choices, and they want choices for something like this. So we developed a system with 6 or 5 planned choices, and we had to run a pilot program on it, and we had people choose. They went online to choose the plan they wanted. And then there were 44 volunteer participants. The first pilot had over 300. It was more behavioral. This one was policy-based. We wanted people with policy interest involved. We had 8 state legislators in the pilot because we were going to move towards legislation for a permanently operational program. We wanted people behind the dais to be able to attest to what they experienced. Much better than explaining it, we thought. They actually paid a road usage charge of 1.5 cents per mile. This wasn't funny money. This was real cash. They received a fuel tax refund, automatically determined. Private sector provided the technology, the mileage reporting technology, and the tax processing and account management functions. And, important to you, is that Washington DOT and Nevada DOT had participants added to the project from their states. Their configuration wasn't quite the same as ours. They had choices about how their system was configured. But they were allowed, they could use our basic system for the reporting and account management. And so we had a 3-state pilot. This led to legislation. This bill is the next big step in Oregon. Senate Bill 810. It requires ODOT to implement a permanently operational program. And the hallmarks of it are 1.5 cents per mile. It's based on the 30-cent Oregon gas tax. The average motor vehicle gets around 20 miles per gallon in the state of Oregon, works out to 1.5 cents per mile. Rebated fuel tax paid. Again, mileage reporting choices are in the law. We must provide choices. Vehicle location technology is not required. What is that? GPS. The first pilot had a GPS box. ODOT chose the box. People didn't like the fact that ODOT chose the technology. What would it do? You can go on and on with that one. So what do you do? How do you avoid that? Let the motorist choose the mileage reporting device. That is what got us through the legislature, it's in the control of the motorist. An open system is a requirement of the law. There's a private sector administration option required. So there'll be a government system, but we're going to try to move most collection costs over to the private sector. Why? It's less expensive to do it over there than it is with a government system. Costs can go down over time on the private sector administration option. With the government administration option, you're pretty much stuck or rising with administration costs. There are penalties. This is a tax bill after all. And most importantly, there is language for protection of personally identifiable information. This language, I personally negotiated with the ACLU in Oregon. They accepted the language and said the bill passes privacy protection principles that they were seeking. I can go into this part in more detail. I don't have this in my base presentation hour. I have 2 slides for Q&A if we want to go there. First application will be 5,000 volunteers, voluntary taxpayers, and the start date's July 1, 2015. This bill had a lot of support. It had the vote in the Senate was 24-6, in the House it was 47-13, and it was bipartisan, both the yeas and the nays. Why would people vote no in a bipartisan fashion? Well, they're sensitive about what it means for their election, let's face it. Okay. So here I am, a DOT person. I have to implement this now. And I'm thinking 5,000 volunteers for a market-based system. That's not much of a market. So how do we get the market interested in it? You do a little magic. We created the Road Usage Charge Summit November 13, a full day. We were fortunate to have 2 members of the Caltrans department, Norma Ortega and Stephen Keck, come up, and Susan Branson also came up for the full day event. It had a policy and a technical track, and we were able to convince 15 state DOTs to send people. 28 people showed up, and 38 vendor companies showed up. And I wanted the vendor companies to know who was there from the state DOT, so I very slowly announced each one with their title. Florida, Texas, California were there, and somebody from the New York, New Jersey Port Authority. Let's just face it, with the one-on-ones meetings 2 days later, or two days afterwards, I learned the benefit of that. People were excited that this isn't just an Oregon thing. This thing could go national. That's what got the vendors excited. There also was a legislative panel at the end of the day so that we could so they could tell the vendors, we're not going to stop at 5,000 volunteers. This is just the last big test. Okay. So what does all this mean? Let's talk about the Oregon platform. It's essentially machine-to-machine communications, a device to a back-end server. That's what it is. It's also known as the Internet of Things. And the language for communication between a device, a mileage reporting device, and a back-end server is something called the standard mileage message, which I'll talk about in a moment. ODOT certifies private sector entities under the open system to provide the mileage reporting technologies, the tax processing, and the account management services. This system is scalable, flexible, and geographically unlimited. Okay, here's how it's structured. You have the mileage data coming from the vehicle to either the commercial account manager of their choice or the government account manager. And that's where the transaction processing occurs and the account management. The reporting then is to the ODOT accounting, and the dollars flow through the Treasury to ODOT. ODOT's responsibility is for procurement of all this and enforcement, as well as evaluation of the system. Okay, let's talk about the standard mileage message. Don't worry, you can't read it. Well, maybe you can. Somebody here might be able to read it. My brother, who's at Hewlett-Packard, can read it. He's a software engineer. This is computer language. Okay, this is real language, but it's computer language. It's in JSON computer language. And the most important thing about it is it's published, and any person who knows JSON computer language, no matter what their political philosophy or ideology, can verify what it does. Here's what it does. Decoded. It transfers this information. Vehicle identification number, so we know what vehicle it is. Reporting device identification number, so they can be paired. The timestamp for installations and removals, so we can see if there's any funny business going on. Total mileage during a reporting period. The fuel consumption, so if you're going to have a gas tax credit, you apply the rate times the fuel consumption to get the credit. And then for advanced plans, mileage by zone. Okay. What's occurring now in Oregon? We're developing the mileage reporting methods. We're going to lock them down. There very well could be some manual reporting, not of miles driven, but of off-road miles and out-of-state miles, to give the impression that we're not pushing somebody to GPS. It might require a logbook, however. We're developing the administrative practices, all the little what-if procedures we're developing right now for the system, the business rules for the involvement of the private sector entities, finishing up the standards for reporting and accounting, and the certifications processes. We have to know that the devices meet our requirements and that the business practices and accounting practices meet our requirements. Nobody's going to enter our system unless they do. Missed one here. Probably the most important thing we're doing right now is communications. As I heard earlier, people are confused about this topic. They don't understand it, and frankly, they make a lot of stuff up about it that's not true. And I've always said that if you need to know 10 things about the system, and you only heard 1 or 2, you make up the other 8 or 9, and guess what part you hate? The 8 or 9 you make up. And that's what we're seeing. So, first of all, we're going to have a marketing plan for voluntary taxpayers. We're also going to do what we can't do prior to government enactment of or legislative enactment of a policy, which is do research into public attitudes and try to develop geographically relevant messages to address their issues on point. We haven't been able to do that. I've been running around the state. Before the 2013 session, I had 25 meetings around the state with just regular folks, and I'm doing the best I can, making up the arguments, trying to adjust to what they're saying. We're going to do science here. We're going to figure out what their real problems are and try to address them directly in a way that works. You don't do that before the legislature enacts policy. It's just too difficult. Okay, what's next? We'll have 2 procurements. We'll have an RFP for the government system, and that will there'll be one winner for that. The RFQ, however, will be for commercial market opportunity. If they meet requirements, they're in the system. They compete in the marketplace. There'll be no winners there except for in the marketplace. Contracting will be through account managers. We're not going to contract with device providers. We have to know too much about the market to do that. We want to learn the business of the account managers and have them contract with the device providers. And then ongoing, perpetually, will be certification. Technologies are going to change, and we want to recognize that. And so people's preference will change with regard to technologies. And so that will happen in the marketplace. This system will not get stuck on one piece of technology. Okay, let's talk about, I can do this last part really quickly. What will the voluntary taxpayer see? First, marketing materials to coax them in. Second, a website explaining the system, followed by a choose your plan matrix. There will be a mileage reporting device activation instructions that will receive in the mail, or they'll go to a dealer to install whatever it is they want. And there'll be an invoice finally with payment instructions. And always available will be a help desk, which became very handily in the pilot, because people have questions we can't even think of, but the help desk can figure them out. Okay, here's what we expect to see. These are the 3 basic categories of mileage reporting plans. 1, report all miles driven. We call it basic. Okay, there's no geographic location element in it, no GPS whatsoever in the device. About 40% of the people chose this technology in the pilot. But the other one, of course, is advanced. Report miles by location, probably has a GPS element in it today, and 60% chose that. We also have a switchable element, which is essentially used as a smartphone. Report miles by preference. People have a reason. They want to turn it on or off. We don't know why. They want to do it. We'll let them do it. Okay. Okay, the matrix, don't try to read this either. This was the matrix for the pilot, but it's going to be similar for the volunteers. We'll put a simple matrix online. They can go through it and decide which plan they want, and then who their provider will be. They can go deeper, too. These are some hot links in here. If you want to know a lot more about it, you can go deeper. Most people say, I don't want to know anything more, I'll just choose off of this. But they'll make the choice. And then they'll get instructions for how to either activate a device that's already built into the vehicle. There are vehicles today that have the capability for mileage reporting. They're electric or they're high-end. You've heard of telematics, perhaps, otherwise known in the showroom as infotainment systems. They can report miles. Activate those for this purpose, and you're in. If you want to use something else, you can add it by installation. If it's a little more complex, like adding OnStar, your dealer will do it. Or if it's a dongle provided as for pay-as-you-drive insurance, you'll install it yourself, which I did in the pilot and took me just seconds to do. Okay. Invoicing and payment. This is going to be easy. The volunteers will choose whether they want to receive their invoice by mail, by email, or automatic account access. They'll have the options for payment of any other commercial transaction. All right, this is my final slide coming up. I do have a recommendation to the state of California. If you're interested in doing a pilot program, you can do what we did, which is spend $3 million in 3 years developing it. Of course, that was back in, $2006. Or you could do what Minnesota did, which is spend $5 million in 5 years developing your pilot program. Or something else. Or you can access Oregon's platform, which is available now. It can be flexible. You don't have to make the choices we did. But you could use the open system and the standard mileage message. And our vendors. And we'll have more of them in about 17 months when we finish the procurement to run a system very quickly. All you have to do is choose and enter into intergovernmental agreements with the state of Oregon, and then you could just choose your participants and run a pilot program. We did this from conception, January 2012, to switch on November 1, 2012, less than 10 months. And we did procurement in the middle of it. If you take the procurement out, you could do a pilot program very quickly in the state of California. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ready? Commissioner Arp.
A great presentation. Thank you. I did a quick calculation while you were talking to see what it would cost me if I was doing your program. And if everybody was like me, you'd be losing a lot of money because, well, I guess I'm a one-person economic stimulus program with my car. I travel a lot more miles, and no, my Corvette doesn't get that many miles, but my Dodge Ram does, and it burns a lot more gas. So I'm just curious how you came up with the particular cents per mile, and whether you feel that that model is going to actually, I mean, why go through this if you're not going to hopefully get more revenue down the road?
Commissioner Earp, I did not choose the rate. It was the Oregon legislature that chose the rate, okay? And they chose a round number for the pilot. There'll probably be a different number when we have what I call mandatory taxpayers later, okay? They were not concerned about the small amount of lost revenue for volunteers. But they did break down the 5,000 volunteers into 3 segments. Those below 17 miles per gallon, okay, and they will get a fuel tax benefit. They'll get a fuel tax refund that exceeds the mileage charge. They're aware, the legislature was aware of that. That's one of the ways we'll coax a certain number of vehicles in. And frankly, one of the senators, that was his objective, because the biggest opponents, and I agree with him on this point, the biggest opponents to this are people that drive fuel-inefficient vehicles. For some reason, it upsets them. And he thought they should experience the system and then attest to how easy it will be. We had that attestation with legislators during the 2013 session. They said that was an easy system. It wasn't a problem. He wants to see it from people of that particular type of vehicle operation. So that was my purpose. This middle group is 17 to 22, which will be, some of them will get a fuel tax benefit, but some won't. And above 22 is harder to get, how to coax them in, but we're developing ways to do that. But that was by design, frankly.
Great, thanks.
Commissioner Simi?
Great presentation, Mr. Whitty. There's no formula for the weight of the vehicle, so it's just 1.5 cents, regardless of how heavy the vehicle is, whether it's 2,500 or 7,000 pounds.
Commissioner,
you have both of them. Commissioner Harp.
Commissioner Semi, that's right. This is a little complex. We already have a distance tax for heavy vehicles. Okay, it's called a weight distance tax because the weight matters more with the heavy vehicles. When you have a 105,000 pound vehicle, yeah, weight impacts the system greatly. But if it's a 6,000 or 7,000 pound vehicle, relatively speaking, it doesn't have much of a difference.
Versus a 3,000 pound.
Yeah. So the bill only will allow vehicles in that are less than 10,000 pounds. I should have mentioned that. So it's the small vehicles rather than the heavy vehicles.
And then this tax replaced your gas tax at the pump, but not your motor vehicle annual fee.
This program is a replacement for the road usage charge is a replacement for the gas tax. All right. We don't have a diesel tax in the state of Oregon for heavy vehicles. We have the weight distance tax. What's the other tax you mentioned?
Your Department of Motor Vehicles tax, the annual license.
Oh, the registration.
Registration.
No, it does not replace that.
So just at the pump.
Yeah.
Commissioner Medaffer?
Thank you. Excellent presentation. Just a quick question. Do they have options as to how often they pay, or is it monthly? How does that all work? Is it debited? What have you thought of in that realm?
Commissioner Medaffer, one of the things we learned from that second pilot was that the difference between road usage charge and a gas tax is quite small. Okay, so we had monthly payment, and some of them were in the couple of dollars. Okay, so you don't really want to have frequent payments. It really is a matter of the circumstances, and the legislation captures that. We're supposed to design a system that captures the frequency based on the individual circumstances of the motorist, and we have to design that. But I suspect most people will be on a quarterly or half-yearly basis, but some will be on an annual basis.
Commissioner Dunn.
Thank you as well for your presentation. I love that you call it a road usage charge. It explains what it is, not vehicle miles traveled or something else. So I commend you for using language like that. I'm hoping that we can do the same thing in California at some point. Of the 5,000 people in the pilot program, have you polled them as to their reactions to the program after a period of time? And second question, where's your auto club on this? Have they been supportive? Love your comments.
Commissioner Dunn, the 5,000 are not in yet. We'll be recruiting them over the course of the next 17 months.
Got it.
And I'm happy to announce that the AAA Oregon, Idaho was supportive of this concept, and they're actually on the Road User Fee Task Force.
That's great.
So we have the backing. Now they have particular requirements. They're not going to go everywhere we would go.
Right.
But they certainly see the need to have something like this for the highly fuel efficient vehicles, which are not paying much for the road system right now.
Good,
So I think working with them will end up in the right spot.
Great. They have a great, ultimately, marketing base, huge market share. So if they're sold, it sure makes the rest of the program able to be sold easier to our buying public.
Well, they're also interested in the communications part.
That's
to make
exactly
sure
right.
that they have to speak to nearly the same people that the legislators do and
Exactly.
convince them. So they'll be involved. We're tight with them as far as working on this. We're not lockstep. I got to be careful about that. We're not
No, because
lockstep.
that's what we're
Yeah.
hearing in Southern California is they want a national gas tax increase. And if there's VMT, they tell me, we want a national VMT program.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure, in talking with Marsha Blackburn, for example, from Tennessee, who loved VMT 10 years ago. And, but she says, well, we're probably at the feds, this is her opinion now, I'm just repeating. She says, we want to see these local pilot programs succeed before we even think about it at a national level. So anyway,
Yeah.
just thoughts to share.
Commissioner Dunn, if I may, I've spent some time in Washington, D.C. on this issue, and don't see them moving quickly enough. They're so far behind where we are now. I think we can bring the states together, this new group called the Western Road Usage Charge Consortium, with now 8 states in it. California is one. We can do a lot of transfer of knowledge and working on issues that haven't been done, like interstate travel and things like that, and really get somewhere quickly, more quickly than the feds can do it right now.
Commissioner Inman.
Do you have toll roads and hot lanes and transponders now that your public is using on a regular basis?
Commissioner Inman, we do not have toll roads in the state of Oregon yet. We're hoping to have a toll bridge over the Columbia River, but it's tough to get.
I understand. Karen Smith. Yeah, I believe so. Do you foresee any challenges in, the communication? I think you're so right on to really focus on how we communicate this. So are you anticipating public confusion? I think I'm paying over here. Why am I going to pay over there?
Commissioner Inman, yes. That is part of why we're going to spend, a fair amount of funds developing communications in such a way that we can relieve the confusion and get people on the right frame of mind. It's hard to do on this. It's hard to get their sustained attention.
Could we offer Hassan up as one of your 5,000?
We're happy to work together with the state of California on any of these topics.
Any questions down there? I had a couple, Jim. Thank you. That was a great presentation, and I congratulate you and the state of Oregon on their pioneering efforts. It's certainly, in my way of thinking, has got to be the future for the whole country to make it work. Because everyone, as you said earlier, everyone's in the same boat in terms of declining revenues and more miles being driven. The billing, I guess I'm a little confused. If I'm one of the 5,000 in this program, I go to the pump, I fill up, I'm basically paying gas tax at that point. So what do I get a refund at the end of the?
Yeah, let me go a little deeper on that. We proved in the second pilot that these mileage reporting devices can not only count miles and report miles, but they can also read fuel consumption of the motor, so that with that data, all you need is to apply the rate to it, the gas tax rate to it, to develop a credit on the bill. So that's how it happened. So you're going to pay the gas tax at the pump, but just that you're going to get a credit for it when you pay your road usage charge. Now, later on, I have dreams of going back to the pay-at-the-pump model a bit, mostly for more of the less affluent types. They'd like to pay by transaction, and don't want a monthly or a big bill. We'll see. We'll look at that in the future. But that's for when we're dealing with mandatory taxpayers. We're not there yet.
And how do they physically get the mileage so that they get a bill? I mean,
yes, there's it basically reads the speed sensor. The device reads the speed sensor of the car to determine miles, and it's accurate. So then it tallies the miles and then reports them. It can report them once a day, although we'll probably have the reporting actually once a month. You reduce communications costs that way, but it will record the daily miles, day after day after day, and then report them.
Electronically, it records it and then sends it on?
Yes, wireless.
And what happens if you're off-road?
If you're off-road, there'll be two possibilities. One I mentioned would be keeping track of it, manual log. The other way will be to use a GPS device, okay, that has a map in it, so that the device will know when it's off-road or out of state, and those miles can be identified and not taxed. But we're looking into the manual approach as an alternative because people do not want to be pushed towards GPS. It doesn't matter how well you design that box so that privacy is protected. It does not matter. They don't want to be pushed there.
We have these that we carry.
Well, I know that. Let me tell the story then. I'll tell the story.
They've never watched CSI.
I'll tell the story. There was a moment a few years ago when I was still defending the GPS approach. And I had an opportunity to speak to the Oregon Design Conference on the coast, a bunch of architects. I said, here's my chance. Educated, smart, creative, think out of the box, perfect. Spent an hour and 15 minutes with them, a lot of question and answer, and their last question was this. They said, we understand the need for a mileage-based charge. That makes sense, but do we have to use GPS? I thought, so driving home, I'm thinking, it's done. If I can't get these guys, I can't get anybody. So I look in the seat next to me, and I see my iPhone and my BlackBerry. I said, those have GPS in it. What's the problem? And then this man's voice came into my head, a young man who accosted me at a talk I gave, I think it was outside the state, and I said, what's the problem? You've got an iPhone in your hand, it's got GPS in it. He said, I chose this, I didn't choose your box. It was that moment when I said, they've got to choose it.
Right.
We can't choose it.
The last question I had, again, I think this needs to be a national program. Did you guys think about, and it was brought up earlier about weights. I know you went up to 10,000 pounds, but I mean, a Mini Cooper, is 2,500 pounds, and a Hummer is probably over 10,000 pounds. Did you think about equating just for, I guess, the incentive to drive a smaller car, drive a car that's more fuel efficient, a different mileage rate for each of those different weights?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that is a possibility. It doesn't make much sense from the point of the damage to the roadway. They just don't do much difference whether you're 6,000 or 3,000 pounds. That's what the scientists tell me. I mean, there is a difference, but it's not hardly measurable. So it would have to be just a policy reason to do that, and that's up for the legislature to decide.
Okay. Any other questions? Great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very informative. Susan, did you have any other comments?
No, I was getting ready for item 23.
Okay.
Yeah.
Item number 20, we're going to skip 21?
Yeah, we're skipping 21, but Susan has a comment on 23.
What about 22? How about 22 first?
Yes.
Juan?
Thank you. Commissioners, this is an information item. This is the presentation of the proposed 2014 shop. I've emailed a copy of the document to you asking for comments, and any comments received will be included in the final that will be brought back to you at the March meeting for approval. Rachel Falsetti has a presentation ready that she's willing to defer for the sake of time, and can provide it separately to especially Commissioner Madaffer and any other commissioner might be interested in it if you choose to do that.
Which would you prefer? Do you want me to give the presentation or just do it separately to others who haven't seen it? I'm okay either way.
How long is your presentation?
Maybe 5-10 minutes. 5 minutes max. I don't care.
I think the commissioner would sense it to do it later.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
That concludes my presentation.
All right, Susan, you had a question on 23?
Actually, Commissioners, it wasn't a question. For item 23, we are going to defer the presentation on the California Freight Mobility Plan preparation and the California Freight Advisory Committee update to the next meeting. However, comments are due to the U.S. Department of Transportation for the Primary Freight Network proposal that is out there in draft. And staff has included in your book item a draft letter to provide to U.S. Department of Transportation for the proposed primary freight network. And I guess what I would like to ask for you is your approval to, as staff, to work possibly with Commissioner Inman on finalizing this letter for distribution to the U.S. Department of Transportation. If you've already read the letter, it's in your book. There is one change that we are recommending be included, a paragraph, to address the need for incorporating sustainability measures into the primary freight network and the national freight network as it's developed and designed. And I would just like to read you this paragraph. This is the one change. It would be to add that California has taken a leadership position in the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by dedicating substantial state and local resources that ultimately provide national benefit. As such, we would be remiss not to address this issue as it relates to the designation of the National Freight Network and the Primary Freight Network. As a condition of federal funding, we strongly urge that recognition is given to states that demonstrate greenhouse gas reductions associated with the freight network. So with that change, that addition to the draft letter that staff has included in your book, staff would recommend your authorization to finalize the letter on behalf of the Commission.
I would move Susan's recommendation that with Fran's review that the letter go out in a timely fashion.
Happy to
just a second, and a question from Commissioner Medaffer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just one comment to Commissioner Inman. Highway 905 in San Diego, which connects to Tijuana and the international border, is hugely important in freight and goods movement. And when I read the letter, I did not see a reference to it in there. For the borders. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say that this is obviously a subject that's near and dear to my heart, and I'm a little bit saddened that we're rushing through a sector that, at least in Southern California, represents 1 in 7 jobs. So it's a huge issue. So with due respect to our earlier conversation, I don't want us to lose sight of the importance of us getting it right when it comes to freight and goods movement and being at the table in terms of spokespersons for our combined good.
We're just deferring the presentation until the next meeting, correct?
That's correct. And, at any time, if the commissioners, we do participate in the California Freight Advisory Committee. If there are specific comments that you as individual commissioners are thinking are very important, be sure to let either myself or Carrie know what those comments are. We would like to discuss that as a member of the California Freight Advisory Committee, and we will defer this to March. And I want to make sure that we provide enough opportunity to really have a robust conversation with Caltrans. So.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Gardino and a second by Commissioner Dunn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 24, Stephen, Proposition 1B savings.
Yes, Commissioners. The Commissioners charged staff with finding a way of capturing Prop 1B savings, and the staff is proposing the following policy for the Commissioners. Of course, we want to reiterate that savings will not be used to cover overruns on existing projects. Number 2 is that most on the individual Prop 1B programs, we have existing program requirements and existing Commission guidelines that do allow for recirculation of savings, and we'll be using those. We have 2 programs which are more problematic, state and local partnership program. We looked at it and we found out that we really cannot recirculate the savings. That was a program at a definite 5-year time frame, and nothing can be done there. Those savings will most likely be lost, but they're not very great so far. They're in the neighborhood of a couple of $1 million. And the last one that is the CMA program, and what we have come up with a construct where we would have the savings from the CMA be applied towards existing STIP projects that have state highway account dollars on them. We would take the dollars off of those projects. These projects would be projects that were under construction by December 31st, 2012. And then we would take the allocated state highway account dollars and we would divert them to the SHOP program. We're also asking the commissioners that commission staff and Caltrans staff to work and develop criteria for what type of SHOP projects the commissioners would like to see this money go to. We'll bring this criteria back to you at the next meeting. On top of it, we would like to have the project chosen by May of 2014, but the department tells us that that's too optimistic, that they will not be able to actually have a project list in such a short time frame. So I think we would be more than willing to extend the time frame on that. And that's, in a nutshell, what are we proposing to the Commission.
Okay, any questions of Stephen? This is an action item.
Move it. Second.
Motion by Commissioner Arp, seconded by Commissioner Asimi. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 25, Teresa, Aeronautics Program Policy Guidance.
Commissioners, item 25 is an action item. This is to approve the Aeronautics Program Policy Guidance. The proposed policy guidance will establish procedures for the Commission in carrying out its responsibilities for the State Aeronautics Program. The Public Utilities Code requires that the Commission adopt procedures for funding the State Aeronautics Program. This guidance is intended to meet the requirement. It will also formalize existing processes and increase the efficiency and transparency in the administration of the program. Staff recommends the approval of the Aeronautics Program Policy Guidance.
Second. Motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, seconded by Commissioner Dunn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 26, Teresa.
Item 26 is an information item. This item is a proposed update to the HRCSA guidelines. That's the Highway Railroad Crossing Safety Account in the Prop 1B program. As we anticipate there will be funds available for a 2014 program of projects, this update is to establish the schedule for the 2014 HRCSA program. Besides very minor changes, all other provisions of the guidelines adopted by the Commission in 2008 remain the same. Staff will recommend adoption of the guidelines at the March Commission meeting. No action is necessary.
Great. Item number 27, Teresa?
I'll handle that one. Item 27 is what I would term the baby Tehachapi project. It's coming back. Staff is recommending that you put the project back into the TCIF program and approve the baseline amendment.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Asimi, seconded by Commissioner Gardino. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We're on to item 28. I believe you need to recuse
Yes,
yourself.
Mr. Chair, I need to recuse myself as my employer, Majestic Realty, owns land immediately adjacent to the Fairway project. And that applies to items 28 and 29. I don't know if you want to do them both together. I'll leave.
Yes.
Well, we'd rather see you come back in and out.
Okay. My vehicle miles per hour.
No greenhouse gas reduction.
Okay, Teresa?
Okay, item 28. This is an action item. This is a program amendment to the TCIF program. It proposes to add $15 million to the Fairway Drive Grade Separation Project in Los Angeles. This program amendment also proposes to add the Raymond Avenue Grade Separation Project in Orange County for $11.89 million. Staff recommends your approval.
Motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, seconded by Commissioner Dunn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 29.
Item 29 are the baseline agreements for 3 TCIF projects. That's Fairway Drive grade separation project, Raymond Avenue grade separation project, and Puente Avenue grade separation. Staff recommends your approval.
Motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, seconded by Commissioner Medaffer. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Did she disappear?
She doesn't want to come back.
She's on the phone.
Item 30.
Yes, Commissioners, I'm going to do item 30 and 31 together. These items relate to the prudent, first one reserved to the prudent reserve. The department is requesting that the prudent reserve be slightly reduced, so those monies can be used to fund the following item, where we would be adding the Cart Mill interchange project to the State Route 99 program. Staff recommends approval.
So moved.
A motion by Commissioner Simi, seconded by Commissioner Tavaloni. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Stephen, the information calendar.
Yes, Commissioners. The next 5 agenda items, 32 through 36, are information reports deemed by staff not to raise any issues. The individual reports will not be discussed unless specifically requested by a Commissioner.
Motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, seconded by Commissioner, well, no, that's an information item.
That's just an information item. We don't need any action.
Consent calendar, Stephen?
Yes, Commissioners. The next 23 agenda items, 37 through 54, are consent items. The following changes need to be identified. Under item 46, the resolution number is incorrect. It should be TCIF AA 1314-04, not TCIF A-11304-04. And item 52, the original item in the book is replaced by a revised item. With these changes, the staff recommends approval of the consent calendar.
Second. Motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, seconded by Commissioner Arp. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. On to item 55. Laurel?
Yes, Commissioners, this is an information item. It's a STIP amendment for notice. The Department is proposing to program border infrastructure program funds, and this will come back in March, probably on the consent calendar.
Item 56.
Item 56, this is an action item to redirect a little over $232,000 in unobligated CMAQ funds from Mariposa County. Mariposa did not obligate the funds in the first 3 years of federal eligibility, and these funds are subject to redirection. They did not request an extension. San Joaquin County is eligible to receive additional funding, is located in a non-attainment area nearby, and has identified a project that can use these funds right away. The Department has recommended the redirection of the funds to San Joaquin COG. Staff concurs with that recommendation and recommends your approval of this item.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, seconded by Commissioner Simi. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 57. Juan?
Thank you. Commissioners, item 57 is an action item. It's a request for a financial allocation for a shop minor project in Contra Costa County. The department is ready to proceed with the project and is asking you to allocate $419,000 to it. Staff recommends your approval.
So moved.
I have a motion by Commissioner Arp in the second. Second by Commissioner Medaffer. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 58, Juan.
Commissioners, item 58 is also an action item. It's also a financial allocation for shop projects. This is a request by the department to allocate $72,256,000 for 13 shop projects that they're ready to proceed with, and staff recommends your approval.
Who made the motion? Commissioner Medaffer? And Commissioner Gardino seconded? Commissioner Tavaloni. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Laurel, 59.
Yes, Commissioners, items 59 through 62 are requests for allocation of STIP funds. I would note that there are some corrections on the change list for item 60 or tab 60 and tab 62. With those changes, staff would recommend your approval of all of these items.
Motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, seconded by Commissioner Burke. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 63, Teresa.
I will take items 63 and 64 together. They are financial allocations for two bond programs. One is the cart meal for State Route 99 funds, and the other one is for the Raymond Avenue from TCIF funds. Staff recommends your approval.
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Dunn, seconded by Commissioner Inman. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 65-1.
Commissioners, action item. This is a financial allocation for Proposition 1B Intercity Rail Project. The department is requesting $6.5 million for the Raymond to Burnson double track project in Los Angeles County. Staff recommends your approval.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Burke, seconded by Commissioner Simi. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 66, Laurel.
Yes, Commissioners, this is an action item. This is a request for allocation of Prop 1A connectivity funds. $8.5 million in these connectivity funds for the Metrolink high-speed rail readiness project. This is to go to an option on their locomotives contract. Staff would recommend your approval.
Move it.
A lot of participation. I like that. A motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, seconded by Commissioner Burke. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 67, Juan.
Thank you, Commissioners. Items 67 through 71 are action items and their time extensions. There's a change on item 67, and these staff recommendations are listed on the spreadsheet your provider in your folder. Project number 2 under item 67 has been withdrawn. With that one change, staff recommends the approval of items 67 through 71.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, seconded by Commissioner Medaffer. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We're now down to the public comment section. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the commission?
Mr. Chair, really quickly, if I may, the connectivity funds that we just approved, it makes me wonder if at some point we may want to have someone from the High-Speed Rail Commission come in and address us on how not only the connectivity portion of their program is going, but their overall goals for 2014, to see if that might be of interest to the Commission.
Litigation defense? To talk to us about litigation defense?
I was thinking more about the actual program, and how the connectivity funds tie into the overall program.
Well,
if there's not interest, we certainly don't have to do it.
It's just they're in litigation.
You're the new chairman. That's your choice.
Well, I want you to still show up for it.
Okay. Any other comments from members of the commission?
Yes.
Well done, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you for a great year.
Yes, Chair Gilmedi, great job running this commission for the last 12 months. I understand you're going to be running CBIA next.
Yeah.
CBIA?
It's hard herding cats. Anyway, this meeting is adjourned. We'll see you tomorrow at the STIP hearing.
So you guys are going to this
No.
tomorrow?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
That's his wishful thinking.
Oh, great.
Are you